Under a dim, yellowish sky, a massive city walled off by towering stones stood alone on the vast earth. A bone-chilling roar echoed through the air, followed by a burst of fire that streaked across the horizon, staining half the sky a deep, bloody red. Suddenly, an alarm blared. It was sharp and relentless. A mechanical voice cut through the air, announcing that a flying beast had appeared 2 kilometers west of the outer city. The city defense force received orders to mobilize immediately. Several combat helicopters rose from within the city walls, tilting their frames to adjust their heading before roaring toward the threat with thunderous force. 10 minutes later, the alarm ceased. The threat was neutralized. The defense force moved in to check the beast's vitals while patrol teams were sent to manage the refugees living outside the walls. Deep in the woods to the west, a heavy thud shook the ground. A massive body crashed down, sending broken branches and leaves flying like a green rainstorm. The beast was riddled with holes from the artillery fire, blood pulsing steadily from wounds as thick as a man's arm. I watched from the shadows. I was a thin figure, moving lightly through the thorns, creeping toward the beast's rear. As I got closer, I could hear its heavy, ragged breathing. My heart hammered against my ribs. I took a silent, deep breath and hid behind a tree, watching for any sign of movement. Once I was sure it was at death's door and couldn't fight back, I grabbed a sturdy branch from the ground. I gave it a quick sharpen with my hands and aimed it straight at the beast's backside. I lunged, driving the branch in with everything I had. The beast let out a pained howl, thrashing its body in a final struggle. The force flung me through the air. I hit the ground hard, feeling like my entire skeleton had shattered. But I didn't have time to hurt. I scrambled up, my eyes locked onto the massive shadow. A notification pinged in my mind. Asterisk target killed. 53 points of life energy obtained. Asterisk. I let out a long, shaky breath. A shimmering, crystal-clear light flowed out of the beast's body and streamed into the space between my eyebrows. Within moments, the light faded. I quickly wiped away my tracks and sprinted into the distance. As I ran through the woods, the leaves crunching under my feet, I heard voices behind me. The soldiers sounded confused. They wondered how the beast had died so quickly, noting their firepower shouldn't have been enough to finish it. They noticed the wound on its rear. Apparently, this had been happening all month. I kept running along the small paths. As I neared the city gates, I saw the refugee tents outside were engulfed in flames. Screams pierced the twilight air, likely the aftermath of the beast's rampage. I didn't stop to help. I couldn't. I pushed myself forward and managed to slip through the city gates just as they groaned shut for the night. Inside the outer city, the buildings were better, though still cramped and dirty. It looked like a crowded village compared to the tents outside. But as I passed through the inner city gate, the world transformed. Skyscrapers touched the clouds, and the streets were a river of flowing lights and cars. It was a bustling metropolis. I hailed a taxi, gave the driver my address, and leaned back, closing my eyes. 20 minutes later, I arrived at my apartment building. I slipped into my room, showered, changed into fresh clothes, and sat cross-legged on my bed. When I closed my eyes, a thumb-sized seal appeared in my mind. It was carved into the shape of a lifelike beast, ancient and elegant. Above it, a progress bar floated in the void, 98.9% unlocked. I still didn't know exactly what this thing was. I had found the seal by accident back on Earth. 3 months ago, after a freak accident sent me to this high martial world, the seal appeared in my sea of consciousness. I had figured out 2 of its functions. Killing enemies granted life energy, and that energy increased the unlocking progress. I had tried testing it at a slaughterhouse, but livestock gave almost nothing. That's why I started glitching the system, waiting for the military to do the heavy lifting, then swooping in to steal the kill on high-level beasts. It was dangerous, but it worked. This one flying beast had jumped my progress by 3%. I was so close. Once this thing fully unlocked, I promised myself I was leaving this house for good. In this world, most people who crossed over became martial geniuses or heirs to great families. Not me. I was a commoner, a trash, who couldn't even awaken. Worse, I was hated by my own family. According to the memories of the original owner of this body, I had been treated differently since I was a child. It wasn't just about the lack of power, it was something deeper. I had originally thought about using my chi to help the family once I got stronger, but now, I just wanted out. A knock at the door broke my thoughts. Fan, it's time for dinner. My mother, Su Exine, called out. I got up, straightened my clothes, and went to the dining room. My father, Jiang Jiha, and my younger brother, Jiang Li, were already seated. The table was covered in food. Come, Fan, try the braised pork. It's your favorite, Su Exine said, pulling me into a seat. She kept piling meat into my bowl. It felt wrong. In my memories, she had never once served me food. I took a bite, my expression cold. Just tell me what you want. The original Jiang Fan was lonely, weak, and submissive. He rarely spoke because he was constantly suppressed. Since I took over, I simply ignored them, and they usually treated me like air. This sudden kindness was a red flag. Su Exine looked awkward for a second, then softened her voice. Fan, I heard you received a bottle of gene medicine at school. Your brother just awakened and needs to unlock his genetic potential. I was thinking, maybe you could let him use it first? I set my chopsticks down. The air in the room chilled. I don't think so. I'll need it later. Su Exine froze. She clearly hadn't expected a rejection. Her face twisted into a look of feigned misery as she grabbed my hand. Fan, please. I'm begging you. Her touch felt like ice. In this world, martial strength was everything. Gene medicine was the only way to break human limits. I had spent countless nights studying, pouring every ounce of effort into my exams to earn that grade 1 medicine as the top student. Because I hadn't awakened yet, they wanted to give my future to my brother. I earned this by ranking first in the exams, I said firmly. If he wants one, tell him to go rank first himself. You ungrateful brat, my father roared. The veins on Jiang Jia's forehead bulged as he glared at me. You're already a failure. Why waste it? 18 years old, and your vitality score is only 0.8, my father sneered. You can't even reach the senior class average. You failed 2 awakenings already. What use is this medicine to you? He leaned forward, his eyes cold and demanding. Your brother, Jiang Li, has already awakened successfully. Give the gene medicine to him. He's the family's hope to rise to the top. When he succeeds, you'll benefit too. Otherwise, with your trash constitution, using it would be no different than pouring it down the toilet. Hearing Jiang Jia's heartless words made my blood boil. According to the first chapter of the Martial Arts Essentials, gene medicine was meant to activate personal talent. Every person had 3 chances to awaken before the age of 18. Only after 3 failures were you officially labeled talentless. I was only on my 2nd failure. Yet here he was, telling me I was already a waste. I wondered if he couldn't read the manual, or if he had just invented his own rules to suit his favorite son. I stared at the table, my grip tightening. Dad, don't blame Big Brother. Jiang Li's voice came drifting over, sounding weak and innocent. He still has one more chance. Let him have it. He's right. I can just work harder on my written exams to earn my own. It'll be tiring and take more time, but I believe in him. If he hadn't spoken, the air might have stayed merely tense. But as soon as those words left his mouth, Jiang Jia's rage exploded. Look at this, my father roared, pointing at Jiang Li. Your brother is 2 years younger than you, yet he's more sensible and understanding than you'll ever be. I let out a cold laugh. If he's so understanding, then let him go take the exams himself. Why are you all ganging up on me? I looked at them with pure mockery. And let's get one thing straight. I'm not letting anyone have anything. This medicine belongs to me. I earned it. I'll do whatever I want with it. Like you said, even if I pour it down the toilet, that's my right. Nobody gets to tell me otherwise. My heart felt like a block of ice. Even though I was a transmigrator, I had all the original Jiang fans' memories. In this house, everything revolved around the younger brother. As the eldest son, I should have been respected, but the reality was the exact opposite. When we were kids, if Jiang Li fell off the sofa while playing, I was the one beaten for pushing him. In elementary school, every new toy went to him first. I only got to touch them once he was bored. By middle school, he was eating the best food while I wore his hand-me-downs. In high school, he stole money to hang out with thugs and blamed me. They believed his every lie without a second thought. I had studied until my eyes bled just to get their attention. I ranked first in every exam. But no matter how well I did, they acted like I didn't exist. Now, they wanted to steal the very prize I had fought for. I wondered if I was even their biological son. Why was the younger brother always right? Why was my hard work always his to claim? You give it to him today, or you don't bother coming back into this house ever again, Jiangjia said, his face darkening with a murderous shadow. I looked at him, my expression mocking. What's wrong? You can't talk me out of it, so you're going to rob me now? Jiangjia flinched. His hand, which had been reaching out, froze in midair. The word rob seemed to sting his pride. He hesitated, unsure if he wanted to cross that line openly. Fan, your father doesn't mean it like that, Su Xian said, her voice soft and manipulative. He just wants the family to prosper. Your older sister is talented, but she's a girl. In the end, this family relies on you and your brother. And since you... She didn't finish the sentence, but the implication hit like a dull knife. She was calling me a loser without saying the word. I hated her even more than my father. She pretended to be the peacemaker, the one who kept things fair, but her actions were disgusting. Every time my father beat me, she stood by pleading for him to stop, while actually fueling his anger with her words. I couldn't stand it for another second. I didn't want to hide or play nice anymore. Forget it. I'm not giving this medicine to anyone, I said, glancing at Jiangjia. If you want to take it by force, go ahead. But if it happens to drop and shatter while we're struggling... I didn't need to finish. The threat was clear. If they lunged for it, I'd smash it. Jiangjia slammed his hand onto the table. You wouldn't dare. The impact made the dishes jump. Soup splashed across the wood. Try me, I said. I raised the glass vial of gene medicine high above my head. The room went silent. All three of them stared at the bottle, their eyes wide. This was a grade 1 gene medicine. In our world, awakening was just the start. To become a true martial artist and break through the 3-pin rank, you needed these medicines to unlock your genetic potential. Even for a branch of the Jiang family, this bottle cost a fortune. Fan, don't be rash. Put it down. Su Xian cried out, her voice frantic. Let's just eat. We're family. There's no need for this. She scurried over, trying to pull me back to the table. She started piling expensive meat into my bowl, acting like a doting mother. Here, try the pork rib soup I made. It's your favorite. I watched her with total detachment. It was the first time in years she had acted this humble toward me. And she was only doing it to protect Jiang Li's prize. Beside her, my father and brother were glaring at me like I was their worst enemy. The original Jiang fan's life was a tragedy. I took a sip of the soup and put the spoon down. It was good soup, but the taste was bitter. What's wrong? Is the food not good enough for you now? Jiangjia spat. If you don't want to eat, then get out. I looked at him one last time. Then, I reached under the edge of the heavy dining table. With a sudden, violent burst of strength, I heaved upward. The entire table flipped. Dishes shattered. Food flew everywhere. Soup drenched Su Xian's expensive clothes. The heavy would slam down, partially pinning Jiang Li underneath. He started wailing in terror. If I'm not eating, I snarled, then nobody is eating. Su Xian ignored her ruined clothes and scrambled to pull Jiang Li out from under the table, checking him for scratches and screaming about whether he was hurt. Jiangjia stood there, stunned by my defiance. Then, his face turned purple with rage. He lunged forward, his palm whistling through the air to strike my face. His hand froze in midair. I held the small glass bottle of grade 1 genetic medicine high. The dark green liquid inside swirled like a curse, keeping Jiangjia rooted to the spot. Even Jiang Li stopped his wailing on the floor, staring up at me with wide, anxious eyes. I looked at their faces and felt a cold smile tugging at the corners of my mouth. I decided to play with them. How about this? I said, my voice dripping with mockery. I'll give you a choice. They all leaned in, their bodies tensed, ears practically twitching. Option 1, I started. I use this medicine myself. If I do, we stay a family. You remain my parents. Jiangjia's brow furrowed. He didn't understand the game. Tell me the second option, he growled. I laughed. I already knew what they would pick. Option 2. I give the medicine to Jiang Li. But in exchange, we sever all ties. I leave this family forever. You choose. I didn't have any illusions left about these people. This was just my way of giving the original Jiang fan some closure. Their eyes lit up instantly. Jiang Jihe stared at the bottle, his greed palpable. Are you serious? Dead serious, I replied. So what's it going to be? The words had barely left my lips before Jiang Jihe lunged forward. He reached out his hand, his intention crystal clear. He wanted the medicine for his precious youngest son. I glanced over at Su Xian. She was still cradling Jiang Li, but when she felt my gaze, she looked down, unable to meet my eyes. In that moment, I understood everything. I had zero value in this house. I smiled again. I stretched out my hand, making it look like I was handing the bottle over. Jiang Jihe scrambled to grab it. But just before his fingers touched the glass, I let go. Time seemed to slow down. They watched in absolute horror as the priceless bottle hit the floor. Smash. The glass shattered. The emerald liquid splattered across the floor, soaking into the rug. The room went deathly silent. When Jiang Jihe finally snapped out of his shock, his rage was nuclear. He didn't hold back. He lunged and slammed a fist into my chest with the full power of a level 2 martial artist. I hit the wall like a cannonball. Furniture shattered under me as I flew across the room. I slumped down the wall, coughing up a mouthful of blood. My chest felt crushed. Through a blur of pain, I looked at them one last time. Jiang Jihe was on his knees, desperately trying to scoop the spilled liquid off the floor. Su Xian was busy checking Jiang Li for scratches. Nobody looked at me. Not one of them cared if I lived or died. I started to laugh. It was a wild, broken sound. I forced myself up and stumbled toward the door like a madman. Outside, a bolt of lightning ripped through the sky. Thunder roared, and the rain began to pour in heavy sheets. I dragged my broken body through the storm, my consciousness fading in and out. I fell. I crawled back up. I fell again. When I finally drifted back into consciousness, I heard a soft, familiar female voice. Is he waking up? Don't rush him, a rougher voice replied. The doctor is still treating him. I fought to open my eyes. My lids felt like lead. Through a tiny slit, I saw the interior of a cramped, humble house. A woman with a kind, soft face was wiping away tears. Who could be so cruel? She sobbed. To beat a child like this. The man beside her let out a low, angry grunt. Who else? That brother-in-law of yours. The boy told me a few days ago he ranked first in the written exams and won a bottle of genetic medicine. He comes back today with nothing and his chest crushed. It's obvious. They stole it for your nephew and tried to kill him. I tried to speak, to call out to them, but no sound came out. I felt a medical device humming against my arm. I needed water. Then, darkness took me again. The next time I woke up, sunlight was streaming through a low window, stinging my eyes. I looked around. The small, cramped room was familiar. It was my aunt's house. Fragments of the night before flashed through my mind like a movie reel. I remembered leaving the Jiang house, wounded and dying. In my haze, I had instinctively crawled here. I tried to move, but my arm froze halfway. A sharp, searing pain shot through my ribs. I gasped, looking down to see my torso wrapped tightly in bandages like a mummy. Don't move, a voice cried out. My aunt, Su Qingwan, ran into the room. She set a bowl of medicine on the table and rushed to my side. The doctor said you have 4 broken ribs and internal injuries. You need 100 days of rest. Lay back down. I shook my head weakly. Auntie, I'm okay. Where's Uncle? And Ning? She hesitated, her eyes flickering away from mine. It's Monday, so Ning is at school. Your uncle? He's out on patrol. My heart sank. I knew that look. Where exactly is he patrolling? What time is it? She forced a smile. Just his usual spots. Don't worry about it. I bought some lean meat this morning. I'll make you some soup to help you heal. She hurried out of the room before I could ask more. I knew something was wrong. My uncle, Ma Jiang, wasn't patrolling. He was out hunting beasts to pay for my medical bills. I remembered the conversation I heard while I was semi-conscious. The doctor says he needs to go to the inner city hospital to make sure there's no permanent damage. The inner city? Isn't that expensive? We have 3,000 credits left, but that was for Ning's tuition. Don't touch her tuition. I'll go out tomorrow and find a way. My eyes stung. In the original Jiang fan's life, His aunt and uncle were the only real family he had. He used to flee the cold inner-city mansion to come here, to this cramped house in the outer city, just to feel a shred of warmth. They were more like parents to him than his own blood. And now, Uncle Ma Jiang was risking his life in the wilderness because of me. I forced myself to the doorway, leaning against the frame. "Auntie, is Uncle out hunting beasts?" Su Qingwan froze. She turned around, her face pale. "I told you, he's just patrolling. Why are you out of bed? Get back to sleep." Her reaction confirmed everything. I waved my hand dismissively, trying to look stronger than I felt. "I'm fine, Auntie. Really, I feel much better now." I walked into the small living room, my mind racing. "I'm going to step out for a bit," I told her. Su Qingwan froze, her eyes wide with worry. "Go out. Where? Lunch is almost ready, and you're still injured." I cut her off before she could start nagging. I needed an excuse, and I needed it fast. I've been stuck in this room for too long. It's cramped, and I'm starting to feel suffocated. I just need some fresh air. I promise I'll be careful. She looked around our tiny, crowded apartment and hesitated. "Are you sure you're okay?" "I'm sure," I said. To prove it, I gritted my teeth and swung my arm. The pain was sharp, like a hot knife slicing through my shoulder, but I kept my face expressionless. She finally sighed, though the worry didn't leave her eyes. "Fine, but don't go far. Come back soon, okay? Stay safe." I nodded and hurried out the door. I had to find Uncle Ma Jiang and bring him back. We didn't have the money, but I could find a way to borrow it. Risking his life for 3,000 Blue Star credits was madness. I couldn't let him die for my medical bills. I navigated the maze of the outer city, winding through narrow alleys until I reached the beast trading market. The outdoor stalls were filled with the stench of raw meat and blood, but I pushed past them toward the buildings in the center. This was the hub for hunting parties. Unlike the professional teams in the inner city, the groups here were makeshift crews of desperate people. Most were ordinary citizens with no awakened powers and no professional gear. They relied on sheer numbers and traps. The death rate here was over 80%, yet the place was packed. Desperation is a powerful motivator. I scanned the crowd, searching for my uncle's face, but he wasn't there. I walked up to the front desk where a girl with freckles was lazily cracking melon seeds. "Excuse me," I said, trying to sound calm. "Can I check the registration records for the hunting teams?" The city government issued tasks to keep the surrounding wilderness safe. If Uncle Ma Jiang was hunting, he would have registered here to claim the bounty. The girl looked up, her eyes scanning my clothes. I looked out of place here, too clean, too well-fed compared to the usual outer city crowd. Her attitude softened slightly, but she shook her head. "Those records are for internal use only, not for the public." I reached into my pocket and pulled out my last 100 credits. I slid the bill across the counter, hiding it under my palm until it reached her. She didn't miss a beat. The money vanished into her pocket, and she spun the ledger around toward me. "Make it fast," she whispered. "I'll get in trouble if someone sees." I flipped through the pages rapidly. My heart stopped when I saw his name. Ma Jiang. He had joined a 5-man team and left for Phoenix Mountain at dawn. They had been gone for 4 hours. "Thank you," I muttered, turning away. Phoenix Mountain was far. My uncle's team, being unawakened, wouldn't be fast. They would rely on ambushes and mechanical traps, which could take anywhere from a few hours to a week. The problem was the mountain was massive. Finding them would be like looking for a needle in a haystack, and in my current state, I'd probably be killed by a stray beast before I even reached the foothills. I walked back through the market, my mind heavy with guilt. If anything happened to him, I'd never forgive myself. I was about to turn a corner when a group of men rushed past me. "Move! Get out of the way!" one shouted. They bumped into me, and I stumbled. The movement tore at my bandages, sending a jolt of agony through my body. I opened my mouth to snap at them, but the words died in my throat when I saw what they were carrying. It was a beast, a live one. My eyes lit up. I forgot the pain and followed them to a stall. They dropped the creature, a small, mangled wolf-like thing, onto a table and put up a sign, 50,000 Blue Star credits. My heart sank. I couldn't afford that. Even though the Jiang family was rich, I was an outcast. I didn't have a cent left after bribing the girl at the desk. But I didn't need to buy it. I just needed to touch it. "Boss," I said, approaching the leader of the group. Can you go any lower on the price? The man looked ready to curse me out, but he paused, noting my inner-city clothes. If you're serious, I'll give it to you for 49,000. Not a credit less. Can I examine it first? I asked, reaching out. The man frowned. It's a scorpion tail wolf. The tail has bone spikes. Be careful. If you get stung, it's not our problem. I didn't care about the spikes. The wolf was covered in wounds from spears and arrows, breathing in shallow, ragged gasps. It was dying. I remembered my lessons on beast anatomy. I knew exactly where the life gate was. While the men were distracted, I pressed my palm firmly against the wolf's soft spot. I funneled what little strength I had into the strike. The wolf gave one final, weak shudder and went limp. It was dead. Actually, never mind, I said, pulling my hand back and acting disappointed. It's too much trouble if I have to kill it myself. I wanted something lively. I turned and walked away before they could realize the beast had stopped breathing. I had only gone a few steps when a glowing interface flickered before my eyes. Unlock progress, 100%. Unlock now. I felt a surge of triumph. My luck was finally turning. Finding a live beast in this market was rare, but it was exactly what I needed to trigger the system. Without hesitation, I gave the command to unlock. Finding a live beast in that state was like winning the lottery. It was rare enough to find a creature on its last legs, but finding one where I actually knew its anatomical weak point, that felt like fate. I had been stuck at 98.9% for so long, and that final blow to the scorpion tail wolf pushed the progress bar to a perfect 100%. A surge of excitement rushed through me, but I kept my face neutral as I left the market. I reached the street corner and hesitated. My mind was racing. I needed a private place, somewhere secure where I wouldn't be disturbed while I figured out what this system actually was. I turned on my heel and headed toward the inner city. Half an hour later, I stood in front of a towering building. The sign above the entrance read, Laming Martial Arts Gym. As soon as I stepped inside, the girl at the front desk, Bing Bing, looked up and smiled. Xiao Fan, you're here, she said warmly. I nodded back. Hey, Sister Bing Bing, is Aiming back yet? He's still in school, she laughed, but then her expression turned to confusion. Wait, why aren't you in class? Laming is still at school, and you two are in the same class. I felt a pang of guilt. I had messed up. Usually, I only came here after school let out, but after getting injured the night before, I hadn't even bothered showing up to class. I rubbed my nose, trying to look casual. Oh, I just had some stuff to take care of at home today, I mumbled. Bing Bing didn't push it. She just nodded kindly. Do you want me to open a training room for you? Your friend Aiming's dad, the boss, said you can use one whenever you need. Besides, it's the middle of the day. The place is empty. Thanks, Sister Bing Bing. That would be great. A minute later, she handed me a slip of paper. Room 7. The code is 48673268. Go ahead. I thanked her and hurried down the hallway. I knew this place like the back of my hand. I found the room, punched in the code, and stepped inside. I flicked on the lights and immediately double-locked the door behind me. I didn't touch any of the weights or equipment. Instead, I sat cross-legged on the floor and closed my eyes. As a guy who grew up reading web novels back on Earth, I had a pretty high tolerance for weird system stuff. My family had disowned me, and my aunt's place was too crowded for secrets. This gym was the only safe harbor I had left. I focused my mind. A beautiful, glowing seal appeared in my vision. Asterisk unlock progress, 100%. Unlock now, asterisk. I took a deep breath. Unlock. My vision blurred instantly. The training room vanished, replaced by a vast, white void. Mist swirled around my feet like a dream. I realized I was standing in the middle of a massive martial arts arena. What is this place? I whispered. A cold, mechanical voice echoed from every direction. Basic assessment beginning. 10, 9, 8. Wait, I'm not ready, I shouted. The countdown didn't stop. Before I could even process what was happening, a dark blur flashed before my eyes. A sudden, agonizing pain exploded in my chest. My eyes snapped open. I was back in the training room, gasping for air, clutching my heart. I was drenched in cold sweat. I had just died. Or at least, it felt like I had. My consciousness had been kicked back to the real world the moment that thing hit me. I realized then how sheltered I had been. I knew the world was dangerous, and I knew beasts were out there, but I had only ever seen that stuff in textbooks. That split second in the arena was the first time I had felt the raw, brutal reality of a fight to the death. Part of me wanted to run away and never look back. But then I thought about my current life. I was a nobody. I was weak. If I didn't take this chance, I'd be stuck at the bottom of society forever. I bit my tongue, tasted blood, and closed my eyes again. Let's go. I reappeared in the arena. The countdown started again. I didn't wait this time. I bolted to the edge of the platform, putting my back to the boundary so I couldn't be flanked. I watched the center of the ring with every ounce of focus I possessed. When the timer hit 0, a man appeared. He wasn't a monster. He wore a traditional high-collared suit and black-rimmed glasses. He looked sharp, his posture as straight as a pine tree, radiating an overwhelming pressure. "You." I started to speak, but he was already gone. He moved like a bolt of lightning. I barely had time to raise my arms in a block before a fist slammed into me. The force was like being hit by a truck. I felt my bones snap, and a second later, I was back on the floor of the training room. "Monster," I hissed, rubbing my arm. The physical body was fine, but the phantom pain of my arm breaking lingered. I was in trouble. I hadn't even awakened my martial talent yet. My blood vitality was only 0.8, barely stronger than a normal civilian. That guy in the arena had to be at least a professional-level martial artist. How was I supposed to beat that? But I couldn't stop. If I failed my third awakening attempt, I was finished. I took a breath and dove back in for a third time. This time, I didn't try to fight. I just ran. I dodged, I wove, and I scrambled, trying to stay alive for more than a second. It didn't work. A heavy blow caught me right between the shoulder blades, and once again, the world turned white. I felt a coldness settle in my gut, and my expression hardened. I wasn't giving up. I went back in. The fourth time, the fifth, the sixth. Each attempt ended in a different nightmare. One time, a lightning-fast elbow strike crushed my skull, killing me instantly. Another time, my legs were swept and shattered, leaving me a mangled wreck on the floor. Once, he gripped my throat and simply crushed it. But as I died over and over, I noticed something. My combat awareness was sharpening. I was starting to read his movements. I lasted 10 seconds, then 18, then 33. A heavy blow sent me flying, and I slammed into the edge of the arena. My consciousness snapped back to the training room. I checked my internal clock. I had finally lasted 5 minutes in a single bout. I was exhausted. My mind was frayed from the constant cycle of death and phantom pain. I was reaching my limit. Part of me started to get frustrated. I felt like I could eventually beat him if I kept going, but it would take forever. I couldn't stay in this private room indefinitely. Maybe I should wait until next time, I thought. I glanced at the timer on the wall of the training room. It read 23:44. I froze. That couldn't be right. I had only been in here for 23 minutes. I had challenged that man dozens of times. Between the fights and the time I spent recovering, it should have been 3 or 4 hours at least. My heart began to thud against my ribs. A wild theory took root in my mind. I scrambled up from the floor and started pacing. If I was right, this cheat wasn't just about a mental arena. It was about time. I needed to test it. I grabbed a stopwatch from the equipment rack and hit start. The moment the digits began to climb, I dived back into the space. The cold, mechanical voice announced the start of the assessment. 10, 9, 8. I tensed my muscles, ready for anything. In this world, before we awaken, all students practice a basic body tempering technique to boost blood vitality. We don't get real combat skills or secret arts until we break our genetic locks and reach the rank of a professional martial artist. I was a nobody with 0 combat experience. In the previous rounds, I had been desperately improvising using the basic 5 elements fist moves I'd seen practiced at the Laming Gym. At first, I was a mess. But after dozens of deaths, I was starting to look like I actually knew how to fight. The man, whose name I now knew was Zhong Shanzhuang, lunged. I dodged with practiced ease and threw a counterpunch. He blocked it with his forearm and transformed his hand into a claw, aiming straight for my face. I stepped back, avoiding the strike, and began to circle him. I was still the weaker fighter, but I was holding my own. It wasn't a slaughter anymore, it was a duel. 5 minutes later, he finally found an opening and killed me. My consciousness snapped back to the room. I lunged for the stopwatch. 32 seconds. I stared at the numbers, a grin spreading across my face. I was right. I had spent over 5 minutes inside the space, but only 32 seconds had passed in the real world. Roughly a 10-to-1 ratio. I felt a surge of pure confidence. I didn't care how strong Zhong Shanzhuang was. I had time on my side. I would grind him down until there was nothing left. 10 hours later, inside the space, I finally saw my opening. I drove my fingers into Zhong Shanzhuang's throat. His body stiffened and then dissolved into light. I collapsed to the floor, gasping for air, absolutely spent. Basic assessment complete, the voice echoed. Entering martial arts moment. The space shifted. Zhong Shanzhuang reappeared, but he wasn't attacking. A name appeared in my mind. Feng Zhu. A voice began to recite his history. He was born into an ancient martial arts family. He started training at 3, mastered internal energy at 8, and began traveling the world at 15. By 26, he had obtained a purple seal and become a great grandmaster. But he had reached a limit. He claimed the world was incomplete, and he spent his life unable to unlock the final mysteries of the seal. He had left his legacy here for a successor. Images flashed before my eyes like a film strip, showing every major moment of Feng Zhu's life. He was the previous owner of the seal. The phantom of Feng Zhu sat down cross-legged. Innate breath-guiding technique, he murmured. Draw the energy of nature into the self. Refine the essence into qi. I followed his lead, sitting down and clearing my mind. Before long, I felt a faint, thread-like current of warmth moving through my meridians. It was weak and scattered, hidden in the tiny details of my body. Following Feng Zhu's guidance, I began to gather these stray threads. They flowed together, forming a small, trickling stream that circulated through my system. My skin grew hot, as if I were being steamed. After the current completed several cycles, I heard a soft pop inside me. It felt like a barrier had shattered. The technique was the foundation of everything. But there was a catch. Feng Zhu had realized that the world's natural energy was too thin to refine properly. So he had created a more aggressive, domineering path, a way to absorb life energy directly from others. That was why I had been able to absorb the energy from the wolf at the market. Feng Zhu's image faded away, leaving me alone. I stood up, feeling the new flow of energy within me. He had left the basic breathing technique for me to learn, but his specialized, aggressive art had been fused directly into the space itself. I wondered how a man, even a great grandmaster, could fuse his soul and skills into an object like this. The power he showed in his memories, shattering mountains and splitting the earth, was terrifying. The version of him I fought must have been less than a 10,000th of his true strength. The world is incomplete, I whispered, repeating his words. I didn't understand what that meant yet, but I knew my life had just changed forever. My consciousness returned to the training room. Immediately, I noticed something strange. I had been fighting for over 10 hours in the mental space. Usually, every time I died and came back, my real body felt like it had been hit by a bus. But now, I felt light. I felt powerful. I went to stand up and realized the lingering aches and phantom pains from my deaths were completely gone. I wasn't just refreshed. I felt like I was overflowing with vitality. I pressed down on the spot where I had been injured earlier. It felt perfectly normal, as if the wound had never existed. I lifted my arm and noticed a thin, dark layer of grime covering my skin. I leaned in and caught a faint, fishy stench clinging to my body. I didn't waste a second. I bolted into the shower room and scrubbed myself raw with soap until the water ran clear. Luckily, the VIP room Bing Bing had opened for me was fully equipped with a shower and disposable training clothes. If I had walked out covered in that black sludge, I wouldn't have known how to explain it. Once I was clean, I cranked the ventilation system to its maximum setting and took a good look at myself in the mirror. Under the bright lights, my skin looked unnervingly pale and clear. Even a small mole I used to have on my arm had vanished. The injuries on my chest and lower abdomen were completely gone. I threw a few test punches, My body felt like a coiled spring, brimming with raw power. Almost instinctively, I began the breathing technique I had learned in that mental space. Immediately, I felt a warm, trickling sensation circulating through my veins. It was a surge of intense energy. In this world, people relied on technology to break their physical limits. Whether it was awakening or leveling up, everyone needed expensive serums. I was the top academic student at Jiangxing Fifth High, but I was considered a loser because I couldn't awaken. But the system I had just inherited was something entirely different. It was a path to power that didn't rely on science. I needed to know if this could break my shackles. I hurried over to the testing station in the corner of the room. It was a portable blood vitality tester, about the size of a briefcase, with a small glowing blue hole in the center. These gym testers weren't as precise as the massive machines at the hospitals, but they were fast. I hit start and slid my arm into the hole. The machine tightened around my wrist, and I felt a sharp prick as the needle drew my blood. A few seconds later, the numbers on the screen began to spin wildly. It stopped at 0.98. I stared at the screen, stunned. My vitality had been 0.8. In just over 10 hours of mental training, it had jumped by 0.18. That kind of growth was unheard of, even with high-grade supplements. Then it hit me. I had been in that space for 10 hours, but in the real world, barely an hour had passed. Gaining 0.18 in an hour? I had never heard of anyone cultivating that fast. I let out a long breath and moved to the combat power tester. It looked like one of those punch machines you see at arcades, with a heavy sandbag hanging in front of a sensor. I shook out my limbs, planted my feet, and threw a heavy right hook. The sandbag slammed into the sensor with a loud bang. The gears inside the machine whirred as the numbers climbed. When the display finally settled, I couldn't believe my eyes. 122. That number broke the threshold for a level 1 martial artist. In our society, the standard for a level 1 warrior was a vitality of 1.0 and a combat score of 100. Every student practiced body refining arts and took drugs just to get their vitality close to 1.0 so they could use an awakening serum. Without awakening, it was considered impossible to break a combat score of 100. It was a law of nature. But here I was. My heart hammered against my ribs. This ancient cultivation system was more domineering than any gene serum. In a single hour, I had reached the strength of a professional warrior. My vitality wasn't quite at 1.0 yet, but I was hungry, tired, and recovering from injuries. That had to be affecting the reading. As soon as I thought about food, a wave of starvation hit me so hard my stomach cramped. I walked out to the lobby, ready to head home. Lin Yuan? You're not staying longer? Bing Bing asked, looking up from the desk. No, I'm done, I said, heading for the door. When Aiming gets back, just tell him I stopped by. Anything else? Just that. Thanks, Bing Bing. I sprinted out of the Laming martial arts gym. I was moving so fast that I was practically a blur. Bing Bing stared after me, shaking her head. She probably thought I was just as impulsive as Aiming. I raced through the inner city gates and burst into my aunt's house. Where have you been, kid? My aunt, Su Qingwan, called out. I've been stewing meat for ages and couldn't find you. I stared at the pot on the table, my eyes practically glowing. I was at the gym. She gasped, her face full of worry. You're injured. Why are you pushing yourself? I unbuttoned my shirt with a grin. Look, Auntie, I'm all healed up. She stood there, speechless. Healed? How? She paused, a thought occurring to her. Was it that elite serum you had? I didn't have a better explanation, so I just nodded. Yeah, that was it. I didn't know it worked that fast, she whispered, looking relieved. She saw me eyeing the food like a starving wolf and laughed. It's all for you. Eat up. I didn't need to be told twice. I sat down and began to inhale the food. In minutes, the entire pot of stewed meat and 6 bowls of rice were gone. I sat there, still feeling a lingering hunger, and realized I hadn't left a single bite for her. I felt a pang of guilt and looked up to apologize, but I stopped. Su Qingwan was standing there, tears streaming down her face. Auntie, why are you crying? I asked, panicking. She quickly wiped her eyes and forced a smile. Nothing, just some dust in my eyes. Are you still hungry? I can make more. I looked at the empty plates, feeling ashamed. You haven't even eaten yet. I'm not that hungry, she said, already moving back to the kitchen. I'll stew another pot for you. She was clearly shocked by my appetite, but she probably figured my body needed the nutrients to heal. I hesitated for a second, then gave in to the void in my stomach. Okay, I said quietly, but just another pot of rice is fine. Even with that whole pot of meat, I was only about half full. I knew Auntie Sue's situation, though. Her family couldn't afford to keep feeding me like that. Exotic beast meat was a luxury, and prices were skyrocketing. I had to talk her out of cooking more. As I watched Su Qingwan busying herself in the kitchen just to boil more plain rice, I couldn't keep quiet any longer. Auntie, I said, my voice low, did Uncle go to Phoenix Mountain? She froze. She didn't turn around immediately, trying to keep her voice steady. Don't go poking your nose into grown-up business, Xiao Yuan. Your uncle is just out on a routine patrol. I grit my teeth. I was just at the beast trade market. I saw the registry. Ma Jiang is signed up for a hunt at Phoenix Mountain. Su Qingwan's shoulders slumped. She turned around, her brow furrowed with worry. What were you doing at the market? That place is dangerous and full of thugs. Don't go there again. She realized she couldn't hide the truth anymore. She sighed and tried a different approach to calm me down. It's fine. Your uncle has a friend who's hunting a beast. He just want to help out. He'll be back in a couple of days. I stayed silent. I knew she was lying, but there was nothing I could do. He was already gone. He'll be okay, I said. I wasn't just trying to comfort her. I was trying to convince myself. I finished the second pot of rice, finally reaching about 80% full. I put down the chopsticks and leaned back. Are you done? Su Qingwan asked, her tone urgent. If you're full, get to school. You missed the whole morning session without even calling in. Now that you're feeling better, go check in with your teachers. I had planned to head back to the Laming martial arts gym to keep training, but she was pushing me hard. Besides, I didn't need to settle things at school. I nodded and headed out. As I disappeared down the street, Su Qingwan watched me go, her heart heavy. She looked at the empty table and felt a wave of anxiety. Both I and her son, Ma Ning, were at the age where we needed nutrients to build our blood vitality. In a rich family, we'd be eating beast meat every day to prepare for the awakening. But here, they relied entirely on Ma Jiang's salary from the patrol squad. It was barely enough for Ma Ning. Now that I had moved in, she didn't know how she'd even afford basic groceries, let alone meat. And then there was Ma Jiang. He had left before dawn to hunt. He was just a normal man. He looked strong because of his manual labor, but his blood vitality wasn't even at 1.0. Phoenix Mountain was a death trap for someone like him. If anything happened to the only breadwinner in the house, they were finished. I walked slowly toward the inner city. My school, Jiangxing Third Martial Arts High, sat right on the edge of the inner district. It was the place where students with bad grades ended up, the ones who had no hope of getting into the prestigious first or second high schools. The Jiang family's cruelty toward me wasn't just about food and chores, it was about my future. My middle school scores were high enough for first high, but my uncle and his wife had secretly conspired to send me here. I found out later they had taken a referral fee from third high to bolster the school's average. They had sold my future for a quick payout. I cursed them under my breath. Environment mattered. At first high, even a basic martial arts instructor was a rank 2 martial artist. The deans were rank 3. They had the experience to help students refine their blood vitality and increase their awakening chances. But third high, most of the teachers weren't even rank 1. They barely understood martial arts themselves. They just read from the textbooks. I honestly wondered if my failure to awaken so far was simply because of this school's incompetence. I walked through the main gates. The rhythmic grunts and shouts of students echoed from the training squares. Every high school here was a martial arts high. We had 2 types of classes, martial arts and culture. Martial arts classes focused on the basic body refining techniques, while culture classes covered history, beast biology, and gene serums. Even though the final exam was split 50-50, everyone knew the truth. Without martial arts strength, you were just an ant. The college entrance exam is almost here. Wake up, a voice boomed. I peeked through the back door of my classroom. My homeroom teacher, Li Dongsheng, was pacing at the front. He was a short, bespectacled man with a loud voice. This is your only chance to change your fate, Li Dongsheng shouted. If you don't fight now, when will you? Do you want to be like your parents? Working at the bottom of society forever? Martial arts is your only way out. He paused to catch his breath. Now, let's review the origins of martial arts. Lei Ming, stand up and tell us. A burly, tower-like boy in the back row stood up, trembling. 800 years ago, a massive meteor hit Earth. The world changed. Phantoms appeared in the sky, and cracks opened in the ground. Beasts emerged. Our guns and bombs did almost nothing. We lost 90% of our territory. The boy gulped and continued. 600 years ago, Dr. Z invented the gene serum. He worked with martial artists to create the Martial Arts Encyclopedia, combining ancient arts with modern science. That's when we started fighting back. 300 years ago, the first rank 9 powerhouse appeared and drove the beasts back to the wastelands. I saw my opening. While Lei Ming was stuttering through his answer, I slipped through the door and tried to sneak into my seat. I hadn't even sat down when a sharp voice sliced through the room. Lin Yuan, stand up. I froze. It was Li Dongsheng. I cursed my luck. I had planned to find him in his office to explain my absence, but he had caught me red-handed in front of the whole class. I had some things to take care of this morning. I started, my voice trailing off. You're a student, Li Dongxing interrupted, his eyes flashing behind his glasses. The exams are weeks away. I don't care how good your culture grades are. If you don't show up, you're failing. Look at your blood vitality, Lin Yuan. It's pathetic, Li Dongxing sneered, his voice echoing in the silent classroom. You've already failed 2 awakenings. If you fail a 3rd time, you're finished. With your grades, maybe you can find a desk job, but remember, civil servants only exist to serve the martial artists. Beside me, Lei Ming felt the pressure lift as the teacher's wrath shifted entirely onto me. He tried to hide a smirk, reaching under the desk to tug on my sleeve, clearly enjoying the drama. I brushed his hand off immediately. What? You have something to say? Li Dongxing snapped, his eyes narrowing. Fine. My office. After class. My heart sank. The next 3 hours were pure torture. Li Dongxing droned on about martial history, but I couldn't focus on a single word. When the bell finally rang, he gave me a sharp look and walked out. I stood up to follow, but Lei Ming grabbed my arm. Thanks for taking the bullet for me, Yuan, he whispered with a cheeky grin. I rolled my eyes. You couldn't even recite the first page of the textbook, you idiot. You should be embarrassed. As I walked out, the whispers started. I heard them clearly. Lin Yuan has finally given up, one student muttered. He doesn't even care about showing up anymore. He was top of the class in 10th grade, another added. The teachers treated him like a god. But now, without awakening, he's just an ant. It feels pretty good to see a genius fall this hard. Suddenly, a roar shook the room. Shut up, all of you. It was Lei Ming. He glared at the class, his eyes fierce. Think you're better than him? The awakening rate for normal people is less than 5%. Even in our top school, it's barely 10. Only one of you 10 will actually make it. What right do you have to talk trash about him? The room went dead silent. They weren't afraid of me, but they were terrified of Lei Ming. His family owned a martial arts gym, and he had already awakened in his 2nd year. With a blood vitality of 1.2, he was someone they couldn't afford to offend. I ignored the noise and walked into Li Dongxing's office. He was sitting back, sipping tea with his legs crossed. He took a long, slow gulp before turning his chair to face me. Explain yourself. Why were you late? I fed him a generic excuse about a family emergency. He didn't seem to care. He just wanted to start his lecture. Lin Yuan, I'm telling you this for your own good, he said, his tone softening into something that felt fake. I was harsh in class, but let's be real. If you can't awaken, a desk job is your best bet. At least you won't be doing manual labor like the other failures. I felt a headache coming on. The way people looked at me had changed so much over 3 years, from admiration to cold mockery. I thought I was used to it, but then he dropped the real reason he called me in. The school gave you a bottle of gene serum as a reward for your top grades last week, he said, leaning in. But look at you. You haven't awakened. You can't even use it. I've been asked by someone to see if you're willing to sell it. I froze. So that was it. He wanted my prize. I've already given it away, Teacher Li, I said flatly. His brow furrowed instantly. If you don't want to sell, just say so. Don't lie to me. Nobody gives away something as precious as gene serum. I didn't want to be there for another second. If that's all, I'm leaving. He slammed his hand on the desk, the tea splashing. What is wrong with your attitude? I'm trying to help you. With zero point 0.8 vitality, you'll never be a martial artist. If you sell it, you can at least live a comfortable life for a while. My blood turned cold. The money I've earned from this school was earned through my own hard work. I snapped, cutting him off. I haven't broken any rules. You're talking like I'm a thief. You skipped class this morning, he screamed. That's a violation. Then punish me, I said, turning toward the door. Give me a warning, give me a demerit, I don't care. But it has nothing to do with my serum. Like I said, it's already gone. Goodbye. I walked out without looking back, leaving him shaking with rage. Lei Ming was waiting for me at the school gates. Did he give you a hard time? He wanted my gene serum. I told him I gave it away. Lei Ming nodded approvingly. Good. Don't give him anything. He just wanted to scam you for a cheap price. Let's go to the gym and train. When we arrived at the Lei Ming martial arts gym, Bing Bing greeted us at the front desk. Open a training room for us, Bing Bing, Lei Ming said. Actually, I interrupted. Can I have a private one today? Lei Ming looked confused. Yuan, if we share, I can help you train. I didn't mean anything by it. I know, I said, feeling a pang of guilt. He was a good friend, but I couldn't let anyone see what I was about to do. I just had a breakthrough in my understanding. I need a quiet place to focus. Lei Ming relaxed and grinned. Oh, I get it. Fine then. Bing Bing. 2 private rooms, grade A. I headed to my assigned room, walked inside, and locked the door. My heart was pounding. I sat down cross-legged and closed my eyes. With a single thought, I pulled myself back into that mysterious mental arena. As I appeared on the stage, a cold, neutral voice echoed through the void. Identity binding requested. Do you accept? Yes, I whispered. Bind it. The first time I challenged this place, there hadn't been any prompts. I hesitated for a split second, then made my decision. Bind, I said firmly. The moment the word left my lips, a pillar of light descended from the void, bathing me in a warm glow. I felt a sudden rush of energy surging through my veins, connecting me to the space. Please provide a name, the voice commanded. Lin Yuan, I replied. A few seconds later, the light faded, and a transparent panel materialized in front of my eyes. It listed my details clearly. Name, Lin Yuan. Age, 17. Bloodline, Huaxia. Cultivation, automatically adapted to the current world. I scanned further down. My technique was listed as the innate breathing and guidance method, and my martial art was the 5 elements fist, currently at the minor achievement stage. But then, I saw the last entry, lifespan. My brow furrowed deeply. 83 years. Was this thing telling me I only had 83 years to live? In this world, gene serums had pushed the human lifespan to incredible lengths. A rank 6 powerhouse could easily live past 150, and a rank 9 martial saint could reach 200. Was this 83-year limit based on my current cultivation level? If I grew stronger, would that number go up? I didn't have time to dwell on it before the voice spoke again. Binding successful. Inheritor, do you wish to challenge the next level? Inheritor. That was the same word the system used before. It confirmed my theory. This space was designed for a legacy. But what happened in the past to require such a method? I shook the thoughts away. If I wanted answers, I had to keep moving forward. Challenge, I said. The world around me blurred and shifted. A countdown appeared in the air. 10, 9, 8. I dropped into a low stance, my muscles coiled like springs, eyes scanning every corner of the arena. When the timer hit 0, a slender figure blurred toward me. I barely had time to raise my arms in a block before a massive force slammed into my chest. The impact sent me flying across the stage. I hit an invisible wall at the edge and slid to the floor, gasping for air. I wasn't dead. I looked up and saw a woman standing in the center of the ring. She wore simple, ancient-looking clothes, but the cut was functional, almost modern. I took a deep breath, preparing to stand back up, but my vision blurred again. In the blink of an eye, I was back in the private training room at the gym. I couldn't beat her. Not yet. I let out a dry laugh, but I wasn't discouraged. The difficulty spike between the first and second levels was insane, and I had only just cleared the first one. It was unrealistic to think I could breeze through. I needed to focus on my training first. I closed my eyes and entered the space again. When the prompt asked if I wanted to challenge the next level, I declined. Instead, I sat down and began to practice. I ran the innate breathing method for hundreds of cycles, feeling the energy form a cocoon around me. I practiced the 5 elements fist over and over, refining every movement until my limbs felt like lead. When I finally exited the space and returned to reality, the physical exhaustion vanished, replaced by a surge of vitality. My skin was covered in that familiar black, oily grime again. After a quick shower, I walked over to the combat strength tester. I threw a punch with everything I had. The machine beeped. 158. Then, I tested my blood vitality. The screen flashed a bright red number, 1.17. I almost shouted for joy. I had officially stepped into the ranks of a rank 1 martial artist. My strength and vitality were both above the threshold. I had awakened without needing a single drop of gene serum. I had spent over 10 hours training in the mental space, but only an hour had passed in the real world. When I walked out, I ran into Aiming. "Yuan, come upstairs for a bit," he said, grinning. "I got a vintage gaming console from the pre-tech era. Let's play." "I can't today," I said, offering him an apologetic smile. "I'm staying at my aunt's place in the outer city. If I leave too late, the gates will be locked." In this world, the beasts ruled the wilderness, and humans lived in fortified cities. The gates between the inner and outer sectors closed at night for safety. Aiming looked disappointed, but nodded. I waved goodbye to Bing Bing at the front desk and headed out. By the time I reached my aunt's house, the sun had already dipped below the horizon. I knocked, and the door swung open to reveal a young, energetic girl. "Brother, you're back," my cousin Ma Ning said, grabbing my hand. "Are you really okay? Mom said you were fine, but I don't believe it." "Let me see." She reached for my shirt, trying to check for injuries. I awkwardly pushed her hands away. "Hey, watch it. You're a big girl now. You can't just go grabbing guys like that." She giggled. "You're not a guy. You just..." She saw my glare and quickly corrected herself. "You're not a stranger. You're my brother." I sighed, stepping inside. "Even so, have some manners." My aunt, Su Qingwan, walked out from the kitchen. "Yuan, you're back. Did everything go okay at school?" I didn't want to worry her with the drama about the teacher and the serum. It was fine. I explained everything to the teachers. She nodded, but then she took my hand, her eyes filled with concern. "Is your body really okay? No pain anywhere?" She had been worrying all afternoon that my sudden recovery was too good to be true. "I'm perfectly fine, Auntie. Don't worry." She finally relaxed and smiled. "Good. Dinner is almost ready. Just wait a few minutes." Normally, I didn't eat much, but the intense training had left me absolutely famished. My stomach was practically sticking to my spine, but I didn't want to seem desperate. "Take your time, Auntie," I said, forcing a calm smile. "I'm not in a rush." Su Qingwan headed into the kitchen to start dinner, leaving me alone with Ma Ning. My cousin sat across from me, leaning in close as if she were about to share a state secret. "Brother, don't go back to that house," she whispered, her voice tight. "Just stay here with us. Every day I come home, Mom chases me around trying to make me cultivate. I can't take it anymore. If you're here, you can help draw some of her fire." Even though she kept her voice low, Su Qingwan heard her from the kitchen. "I only nag you for your own good. If you become a martial artist and get into a top university, your life will be so much better than ours. Maybe then I could finally stop worrying." Ma Ning and I traded a look and shared a helpless smile. We'd heard this lecture so many times we practically had calluses on our ears. "But Ning is right," my aunt added, her voice softening as she stepped out. "Xiao Yuan, don't go back there. Stay here. If those people have a problem, I'll be the one to deal with them." I knew what they were thinking. Ever since I showed up heavily injured the day before, they had decided they couldn't let me return to that toxic environment. They weren't rich, far from it, but they wanted to keep me alive. "Okay, Auntie," I said quietly. I already broke ties with them yesterday anyway. Su Qingwan froze for a second, then nodded firmly. "Good. That's good." A few minutes later, dinner was served. It was a feast compared to their usual fare, 3 dishes and a soup, featuring a plate of exotic beast meat. Ma Ning's eyes nearly popped out of her head. "Wow, why is it so fancy today?" she asked, drooling. "Your brother was hurt yesterday," Su Qingwan said, ruffling her hair. "He needs to recover. I went to the market specifically for this meat. You're just lucky you get to share his good fortune. Ma Ning beamed, but when I started piling the meat onto her plate, she tried to push it back. Enough, brother. I can't eat that much. She was a smart girl. She knew this meat was meant for my recovery, and she didn't want to take it from me. Just eat. I laughed, continuing to stack her plate. I ate a huge meal at noon. I'm still stuffed. That seemed to put her at ease. We finished the meal in high spirits. Ma Ning was already an awakened student, and her appetite showed it. She polished off 4 bowls of rice. I followed suit, matching her bowl for bowl to keep my strength up. After dinner, Ma Ning looked around. Where's Dad? Su Qingwan gave her the same excuse she'd given me. He's out with the patrol team. He won't be back for dinner. He'll be home soon. Probably just got delayed by some work. She turned to me. Xiao Yuan, you'll sleep in this room tonight. I looked at the door she pointed to. Wait, isn't that Ma Ning's room? I cleared out the small study for Ning, she explained. It used to be full of junk, but I fixed it up for her today. I felt a pang of guilt. I couldn't let my cousin get kicked out of her own room for me. After a long argument, I finally convinced my aunt to let me take the study instead. It was small, just a mattress on the floor where the clutter used to be, but it was private. As I lay there, I realized my presence was a burden on them. They were struggling, yet Ma Jiang was out risking his life at Phoenix Mountain just to pay for my medical bills. I needed to make money, and fast. For a split second, I actually regretted smashing that gene serum. I spent the entire night inside the system's training space. I lost track of time, dying over and over again. When I finally snapped back to reality, I saw a sliver of light peeking through the window. 9 hours had passed. In the mental space, that was over 3 days of intense training. I had practiced the 5 elements fist from the gym and the breathing techniques until my muscles burned. I still couldn't beat the woman in the second trial, but I was lasting longer. I could survive 10 minutes now, and I'd even managed to land a few hits. Next time, I told myself. Next time, I'll win. I stood up, feeling surprisingly refreshed. Training in the space seemed to count as rest for my body. It was a massive discovery. I checked my watch, 7 a.m. Time to get ready for school. I crept toward the bathroom to brush my teeth, trying not to wake anyone. Suddenly, a heavy pounding echoed from the front door. I opened the bathroom door, foam still in my mouth, and saw Su Qingwan rushing out of her room. Who was it this early? I mumbled. She shook her head and opened the door. 3 large, rugged men stood there, their faces grim and stained with tears. They were carrying a stretcher. Sister-in-law, we're sorry, one of them choked out. We couldn't protect Brother Ma. Su Qingwan gasped, her hands flying to her mouth. Ma Jiang was lying on the stretcher, pale and weak. His right sleeve was empty. A thick, blood-stained bandage was wrapped around the stump of his shoulder. Get him inside. Quick, she cried, her voice breaking. They laid him on the sofa. Ma Jiang tried to look at her, his voice a raspy whisper. I'm okay. It's just the arm. Don't talk, she sobbed. Just rest. The men explained what happened. They were all part of the patrol team, tired of living on measly wages. When Ma Jiang suggested hunting a beast at Phoenix Mountain, they jumped at the chance to change their lives. But they were outmatched. They ran into a stone-armored boar, a monster even professional martial artists struggled with. The team lost 1 man. Ma Jiang lost his arm. They had spent every cent they had just to get him patched up at a clinic before bringing him home. Uncle, I dropped my toothbrush and ran to his side. At that moment, Ma Ning ran out of her room, her face turning white as she saw her father's mangled body. We both knelt by the sofa, staring at the cost of our survival. I couldn't stop the tears. Guilt gnawed at my insides like a physical pain. If it wasn't for me, Ma Jiang wouldn't be lying there broken. If I hadn't been so obsessed with that gene medicine, if I had just let those thugs take it, none of this would have happened. After the men left, Su Qingwan walked back into the living room. She saw me standing there, frozen and pale. She knew what I was thinking. Xiao Fan, don't overthink this, she said softly, trying to comfort me. But I could see the worry etched into her own face. Ma Jiang's wound would heal, but what then? The patrol team wouldn't want a one-armed man. The medical bills alone would drain everything we had. And Ma Jiang was stubborn. He was the one who suggested the hunt. Since one of his teammates died, He'd insist on supporting that man's family until his last breath. We needed money. A lot of it. The men had left a pile of medicine and instructions. Su Qingwan, Ma Ning, and I worked together to change his bandages. Ma Jiang didn't make a sound, but his body jerked with every touch, and sweat poured off him in thick beads. Seeing him suffer made my chest tighten. Xiao Fan, go to school, Su Qingwan said, handing him a bowl of thin meat broth. You'll be late. I've got your uncle. She pushed me toward the door. As I walked down the stairs, I heard her hushed voice from inside the apartment. Ninger, can you ask your teacher if we can pay next semester's tuition late? Mom, I'm not going back, Ma Ning sobbed. I'll stay home and take care of Dad. Don't be foolish. Su Qingwan snapped. You're starting your senior year. Your studies come first. I clenched my fists until my knuckles turned white. I didn't go to school. I headed straight for the Laming martial arts gym. I knew Ming. He was always late, and sure enough, I caught him strolling out of the building. Xiao Fan, what are you doing here? He looked surprised. We were friends, but I never waited for him in the morning. You look terrible. What happened? I shook my head. I didn't want to get into the messy details. Ming, can you tell Teacher Li I'm taking a leave of absence? Maybe 2 days. Ming frowned. What's going on? I told him a part of it, just that Ma Jiang was badly hurt. Ming didn't ask more questions. He just patted his chest. Say no more. I'll handle the school. Go take care of your family. Thanks, I muttered. He punched my shoulder lightly. We're brothers. Don't be a stranger. I left the gym and headed for the outer city. There was only one way to get money fast. Hunting. I arrived at the beast trading market and walked up to the reception desk. Do you have any teams looking for members for a Phoenix Mountain mission? The girl behind the counter looked up. She recognized me from earlier. You again? What do you want with Phoenix Mountain? I need to make some money, I said, trying to look confident. She scowled. Don't be ridiculous. You're just a kid. The wild is dangerous. Go home to your parents. I got into some trouble. I lied. I need the cash. Is your life worth more than money? She shouted, her voice drawing a crowd. I felt a headache coming on. I was about to turn and leave when a gravelly voice boomed behind me. The kid wants a mission? A man built like a stone tower stood there, grinning at me. I've got a Phoenix Mountain run. You interested? Before I could answer, the receptionist glared at him. You Lao-san, have you no shame? He's a child. Don't lure him into your traps. The man, Yu Lao-san, flinched slightly but quickly recovered his greasy smile. Xiao Xian, that's harsh. I'm not tricking anyone. The kid wants to go, right? The girl looked at me, her eyes screaming a warning. This guy is a vulture, she hissed. He recruits rookies just to use them as bait. Nobody comes back from his teams in one piece. I wasn't stupid. I could see exactly what Yu Lao-san was. But I didn't know the terrain of Phoenix Mountain, and I needed a guide. If things got hairy, I'd just ditch them. I know, I said to the girl. I still want to go. She threw her hands up in frustration. Fine. Die out there for all I care. Yu Lao-san laughed and threw an arm over my shoulder, leading me away. Once we were in a quiet corner, he leaned in. Don't listen to her. I've been out there dozens of times. You're in good hands. I pushed his arm off. Show me the route. He pulled out a map. Straight through the west woods. Then we hit the southeast perimeter of the mountain. I studied the map carefully, memorizing the landmarks. I didn't trust him, but I wasn't afraid of him either. He wasn't a true martial artist. As long as I stayed sharp, I could handle whatever he threw at me. An hour later, I was in the back of a battered jeep. Yu Lao-san sat next to me. 2 other men, Wei and Xiao Dao, were in the front. They both looked like the kind of guys who enjoyed breaking bones. See, kid, Yu Lao-san grinned as the car bounced over the rough terrain. I told you, we're pros. There's one more thing I didn't tell you, Yu Lao-san said, leaning back in the jeep with a smug grin. We're more than just experienced. We're well equipped. He patted the seat of the battered vehicle. How many kids your age get to ride in a professional hunting team's rig? This jeep is the real deal. I didn't say much, just offered a small, polite smile. Yu Lao-san was definitely exaggerating, but he wasn't lying about the speed. What would have been a half-day trek on foot took us barely an hour. Soon, the jagged peaks of Phoenix Mountain loomed over us. Legend says a phoenix once nested here in ancient times, leaving the land filled with strange, spiritual energy. It was a massive range, stretching for miles. Ancient, towering trees choked the slopes, and a thick, unnatural fog often rolled through the valleys. It was beautiful in a haunting way, but the locals knew better. This wasn't a scenic getaway. It was a place of shadows and predators. We reached the base and hopped out. The men didn't just leave the car. They pulled out containers and began draining the gasoline from the tank. Once it was bone dry, they wrapped heavy alloy chains around the wheels and locked them tight. "I get the chains," I said, watching them work. "But why drain the gas?" Xiao Dao looked up, his eyes cold and sharp. "So if some rat breaks the chains, they still can't drive it away." I nodded. These guys were thorough. They were also paranoid. As we started up a narrow mountain path, Yulausen tossed me a heavy object. I caught it by the hilt. It was a rusted iron sword, pitted and dull. "Hold on to that," he said. "You know how to use it?" I didn't answer. Instead, I gave the blade a quick, fluid flick. The metal whistled through the air, tracing a perfect arc before I settled back into a relaxed stance. Yulausen blinked, his smirk faltering for a second. "Not bad," he muttered. "Just stay close. We're in the outer perimeter, but the beasts here are fast. They might not kill you instantly, but they'll shred your face before you can blink. It's a mess to clean up in the wild." We hiked deeper, our eyes scanning every bush and rock. We were entering the territory of the mutated beasts. Awei and Xiao Dao gripped their weapons, their bodies tensed. We reached a flat clearing. Yulausen knelt, picking up a clump of sticky, dark substance from the dirt. He sniffed it, then scaled a nearby tree with the agility of a monkey. A moment later, he dropped back down and signaled the others. Awei and Xiao Dao didn't waste a second. They pulled out shovels and started digging. They were strong, moving dirt with terrifying efficiency. Within minutes, they had carved out a 3-meter-deep pit. They lined the bottom with jagged, sharpened stakes and covered the top with a layer of thin branches and dirt. It was a perfect, invisible death trap. Then came the real work. "All right, kid," Yulausen said, walking over to me with a dark, oily grin. "Time for you to earn your keep." I looked at the trap, then back at him. "How can I help? I'm not a martial artist. I don't have the experience." Yulausen's smile widened. "You don't need experience. You just need to stand right here and wait." "Wait for what?" I asked. "For the scorpion-tail wolf," he chuckled. I took a stumbling step back, my face pale. I made sure my hands were shaking. You want me to be bait?" Xiao Dao sneered from the side. "You think we brought a useless brat like you for your conversation? You're the lure. That's your only value." Yulausen stepped in, putting on a fake show of kindness. "Don't listen to him, Lin Yuan. You'll be fine. Just stand by the fire and follow my lead. We've got our weapons trained on this spot. If anything moves, we'll take it down before it touches a hair on your head." I knew he was lying. If the wolf attacked, they wouldn't risk their lives for me. And even if I survived, they'd likely kill me anyway to keep the loot for themselves. But I needed them for now. I needed to see how these beasts fought. You have to save me if it gets close," I whispered, looking terrified. Of course," Yulausen said, patting my shoulder. He thought he had me pegged. He thought I was just another naive kid with a dream of adventure. He started a small fire in the center of the clearing and gave me his final instructions. "Scorpion-tail wolves are cunning. They hunt at night. It'll probably come from those bushes to the east. When it lunges, you run toward the pit. Just stay fast." He didn't mention the poison. One scratch from a scorpion-tail wolf stinger could paralyze a grown man in seconds. They were fast, mean, and relentless. Yulausen climbed back into the trees, disappearing into the shadows with his bow. Awei and Xiao Dao vanished into the undergrowth. I was alone in the circle of firelight. The sun dipped below the horizon, and the forest turned into a wall of black. I sat by the fire, but I wasn't just waiting. I began to circulate my internal breath, using the ancient technique I'd practiced. Suddenly, my senses exploded. The world became sharp. I could hear the rustle of leaves 100 yards away. I could smell the damp earth and the metallic scent of the hidden stakes. Time crawled by. Then I heard it. A soft, wet crunch in the bushes to the east. It was faint, nearly silent, but to my heightened ears, it sounded like a footstep on dry glass. I didn't move. I kept my back to the sound, my body coiled like a spring. I glanced toward the trees where Yulausen was hiding. He was still looking the other way. They hadn't heard a thing. The predator was here, and I was the only one who knew it. San and the others hadn't noticed a thing. The scorpion-tail wolf was already here. It seemed that after becoming a martial artist, my senses were far superior to those of an ordinary person. I followed our prearranged signal. I reached down, picked up a piece of firewood, and tossed it into the center of the flames. The sudden flare was the sign. San and his crew caught the hint immediately. They scanned the darkness, their eyes landing on the rustling bushes. A glint of excitement flashed in their eyes. They drew their bows, pulling the strings back into full crescents. The wolf sensed the movement. It was smart. It stopped instantly, freezing in the shadows. A moment later, there was another soft rustle, and again, the beast went dead still. I tracked its every move with my mind. The data was right. These things were incredibly cunning. Even though it saw a weak human sitting alone, it approached with the caution of a stalking leopard. It took its time, circling until it found the perfect angle to strike. The moment my finger brushed a dry branch on the ground, it moved. Whoosh! A dark blur erupted from the bushes, lunging straight for my throat. I had been waiting for this exact second. I exploded with power, my legs driving me toward the trap. The scorpion-tail wolf was a rank 1 beast, and it was fast. But compared to the female cultivator I fought in the system arena, it felt like it was moving in slow motion. I didn't just run. I calculated. I deliberately controlled my speed, leading it on. Just as I reached the edge of the pit, I pivoted my right foot in a high-difficulty maneuver, snapping my body to the side. The wolf sailed past me, caught in its own momentum. Fire! Arrows from San and Xiao Dao whistled through the air like a deadly incantation. One after another, they streaked toward the beast. My face paled as I ducked out of the way of a stray shot. Thud! The wolf was slammed by 3 arrows mid-air and tumbled into the pit. San and the others didn't hesitate. They leaped from the trees, surrounding the hole, and raining arrows down until the wolf looked like a pincushion. They didn't stop until the beast stopped twitching. Heh, thanks, kid. San walked toward me with a sinister grin. I looked at them. They weren't moving toward the wolf to harvest the materials. They were fanning out, surrounding me instead. What are you doing? I asked, my voice flat. Heh, little brother, San sneered. Why don't you help us one last time and die for? He didn't get to finish. I moved first. I lunged forward with lightning speed. My blood vitality exploded to its limit as I threw a heavy right punch. There was a dull, wet thud. San's back bulged from the impact. His eyes widened in absolute shock. He never expected a sheep like me to be a trained fighter. That single punch felt like a sledgehammer, shattering his internal organs instantly. Blood leaked from the corner of his mouth. Before he could say another word, I hooked my hand into a claw. My thumb and forefinger clamped onto his neck like iron pliers. With a sharp twist, cracked star. His head slumped, and he hit the dirt, eyes wide and lifeless. It happened in a heartbeat. By the time Wei and Xiao Dao realized what was happening, their leader was a corpse. They stood there, frozen. They couldn't understand how a high school kid had suddenly turned into a powerful martial artist. Panic set in. Wei scrambled for the machete at his waist. Xiao Dao, who was further away, frantically tried to notch an arrow. I didn't give them a chance. I slid my right foot across the dirt, appearing in front of Wei instantly. I slammed a palm down onto the top of his head, using the momentum to vault myself through the air toward Xiao Dao. Xiao Dao had just pulled his string back, but he was too slow. I struck with my fingers stiffened like an arrow, driving them straight into his throat. He froze. Blood sprayed from his neck. I didn't stay to watch him fall. I spun back toward Wei. He was dizzy and stumbling from my initial blow, his eyes filled with pure terror as I closed the distance. Brother, listen to me, he screamed. I was wrong. Please let me go. I looked down and saw the machete he had dropped. I picked it up and gave it a casual toss. The blade buried itself deep into Wei's chest. If you're wrong, you pay the price, I said coldly. Wei tried to speak, but only thick bubbles of blood came out. His hand reached out, then dropped heavily. He slumped over, dead. I looked at the bodies. I felt no guilt. They wanted to kill me, so I killed them. It was simple logic. These men were predators who had done this many times before. I could tell by the way people avoided them at the market. I was just cleaning up the trash. I picked up Awei's canteen and began slowly washing the blood off my hands. I dried them on his clothes, then searched the bodies. I found a map and a bottle of gasoline on Xiao Dao. I walked over to the pit, dragged the scorpion tail wolf out, and tossed the 3 bodies inside. I uncorked the gasoline, took a sniff, and poured the entire bottle over them. The campfire from earlier was dying down, but a few embers still glowed. I picked up a smoldering branch and flicked it into the pit with a snap of my fingers. Boom. Flames roared upward, consuming everything. I stood there, watching the fire light up the dark forest. I finally understood the truth of this world. It wasn't just about beasts. Sometimes, the real monsters were the ones standing right next to you. Old Kai and his men clearly brought that gasoline for one reason: to make bodies disappear. They must have done this dozens of times before. It was a dark irony that the fuel they used to hide their crimes was now being used to erase them from existence. I watched the orange light flicker against the trees and pulled out the map I'd scavenged from Old Kai's pocket. I studied the lines by the firelight. I was deep in the heart of the Phoenix Mountain outskirts, right on the edge of the inner circle. I spent a long time tracing the paths, trying to figure out which way led back to civilization. Even though I was finally a rank 1 martial artist, Phoenix Mountain was no playground. Staying here after dark was a death wish. I had the scorpion tail wolf carcass with me. It was a low-level beast, but its parts were worth tens of thousands of blue star coins. That kind of money would solve all my immediate problems. As I started moving, I felt a pang of regret. When Old Kai's crew attacked, they were too fast. They killed the wolf with their arrows before I could land the finishing blow myself. If I had been the one to kill it, I could have used my system's seal to absorb its life energy. It was a missed opportunity to grow stronger, but there was no use crying over spilled blood. The wind whistled through the valley, rattling the branches. Every time a twig snapped under my boots, my heart jumped into my throat. I was used to hunting in the thickets outside Jiang City, but that was different. The city guard and patrols kept those areas relatively clear. If a beast showed up there, it was dealt with quickly. Phoenix Mountain was a different beast entirely. This was where the monsters fled when humans pushed them out of the lowlands. The danger here was on another level. Rumor had it that rank 4 beasts roamed these woods, creatures with power that could challenge the president of the Martial Arts Association. To a rank 1 rookie like me, encountering one meant instant death. Luckily, beasts are territorial. The high-level monsters usually stayed in the deep interior. As long as I stayed on the periphery, I should have been safe. I picked up my pace. The trees blurred past me as I ran, my enhanced strength making the terrain feel easy. Then I stopped dead. Mist was rolling in. It wasn't normal fog. It was thick and viscous, like flowing water. Within seconds, my vision was cut down to a few feet. In the oppressive silence, I felt it, a pair of eyes watching me from the darkness. Cold sweat broke out on my forehead. I had taken a wrong turn. I fumbled for the map, but the fog was so dense I couldn't even see my own hands. I had been heading for the exit, so how did I end up in a place like this? Was Old Kai's map a fake, or had the terrain shifted? I didn't have time to think. That sensation of being hunted was crawling up my spine, making my skin itch. I knew something was out there. I couldn't see it, but I could feel it. Sweat rolled into my eyes, stinging like fire, but I didn't dare move a muscle to wipe it away. I stood frozen, my breath shallow. Then I heard it. A soft, rhythmic sliding sound. Shoo-shhhshhh. It was getting closer. I felt a surge of panic, but I forced it down. I needed a way to see. My eyes were useless here, just like they had been in the system's mental arena when I fought that high-collared man. Wait, the arena. In that space, when the enemy was too fast to see, I had survived by using the ancestral breathing technique. It allowed me to sense movements through the air and the ground rather than relying on sight. I took a deep breath, centered myself, and activated the technique. The world changed. My ears cleared, and my skin became hypersensitive to the vibrations in the mist. To my right and slightly behind me, I sensed a massive shape coiling through the undergrowth. It was huge, a giant python. My hand tightened around the handle of the machete I'd taken from Xiao Dao. I was lucky I'd kept it as a backup. But could a simple blade stop a monster like this? The answer came with a sudden whoosh. The python lost its patience and launched itself from the mist like a bolt of lightning. Because of my breathing technique, I sensed the shift in the air before it even moved. I slammed my feet into the dirt and threw myself to the side. Crunch. The python missed, its massive head slamming into a boulder behind me. The impact shattered the stone into fragments, and sparks flew as its scales scraped against the rock. Seeing those sparks gave me a moment of clarity. It was a green forest python, a rank 2 beast. I remembered the descriptions from my beast studies classes. They were terrifyingly strong and covered in armor-like scales, but they weren't particularly smart. They relied on pure brute force to crush their prey. If I could avoid being coiled or struck by that massive head, I had a chance. More importantly, I knew its one fatal weakness: its belly. Underneath all those iron-hard scales, its underside was soft. I just had to get close enough to open it up. I looked at the massive snake and felt a surge of greed. Most people would have taken the chance to run, but I wanted its life energy. I needed it. The python didn't like missing its target. It hissed, its tail whipped the ground, and it launched its massive body at me again. I was ready. I backed up toward a thick tree, waiting for the perfect moment. As the beast closed in, I pivoted, slammed my foot against the trunk, and launched myself into the air. I gripped the machete with both hands and drove it downward with everything I had. The python didn't flinch, it charged straight into the blade. But at the last second, I twisted my body in midair and slid underneath its pale underbelly. I felt for the softest spot and shoved the steel in. Clang! My heart sank. The blade bit into the skin, but it didn't go deep. I'd missed the vital spot. Even with my boosted blood vitality, the python's hide was like cured leather. I tried to scramble away, but I was too close. Before I could clear the strike zone, a massive tail slammed into my ribs like a freight train. I flew through the air and crashed into the dense undergrowth. I hit the ground hard. I coughed, and a spray of bright red blood hit the leaves. That single hit almost took half my life. These rank 2 beasts didn't need special powers. Their raw strength was enough to pulverize a normal martial artist. But I wasn't normal. I had died 1,000 times in that mental arena at the gym. I knew how to suffer. I forced myself up, teeth gritted against the agony in my chest. The python charged again. It sent me flying a second time. I kept moving, staying just agile enough to avoid being coiled. If those coils tightened around me, it was game over. We danced this deadly dance for 10 minutes. Sparks flew as my blade scraped scales. Trees snapped like toothpicks. Then, I saw the opening. I lunged, driving the machete deep into the python's 7-inch mark. The beast let out a final, shuddering tremor. To make sure, I twisted the blade, carving through its internals until the thrashing stopped. I collapsed onto the dirt, gasping for air. My lungs burned. Then, a crisp sound echoed in my head. Ding. Target killed. You have gained 121 points of life energy, asterisk. A thick stream of invisible energy surged from the carcass into my body. It was massive. The energy flooded my meridians, turning the thin trickle of my power into a rushing river. I felt my cracked ribs knit back together. The internal bruising vanished. My blood vitality soared, filling me with a strength I'd never felt before. I stood up and threw a punch at the air. I felt invincible. The mist around me began to fade. I climbed a tree and pulled out the map Yu Lao-san had given me. As I studied it by the dim morning light, my blood ran cold. The bastard had set me up. The map was inverted. Every path he marked as an exit actually led deeper into the dangerous heart of Phoenix Mountain. He never intended for his baits to come back alive. If they died in the woods, they couldn't report his crimes to the city authorities. It was a perfect, cold-blooded execution. If I hadn't been strong enough to kill that python, I would have been just another skeleton in the forest. I didn't linger. I couldn't carry the giant python, so I left it behind, grabbing only my machete and the scorpion-tail wolf carcass. I ran. I covered 10 miles in a blur, my new strength making the rough terrain feel like a flat track. I found Yu Lao-san's abandoned car near the mountain's edge. I didn't know how to drive, and the city gates wouldn't open until dawn, so I hunkered down. I didn't sleep. In the wilderness, closing your eyes is a death sentence. When the sun finally broke the horizon, I scavenged the car. There was nothing of value left. I threw the wolf over my shoulder and started the long trek back to Jiang City. The dozens of kilometers passed in just 2 hours. I reached the city gates at 6 in the morning. I looked like a ghost, clothes shredded, covered in dried blood and dirt, carrying a monster on my back. The guards and early travelers stared and whispered, but I ignored them. I headed straight for the beast trade market. The market was already buzzing. Hunting teams were returning with their kills, and parents were haggling for small scraps of meat to boost their children's vitality. I found an empty spot and dumped the scorpion-tail wolf onto a stone platform. A few people walked by and asked the price, but they walked away the moment I told them I was only selling it whole. I didn't have time to play butcher. My patience was wearing thin. I looked at a nearby stall where a professional-looking hunting team was setting up. "Do you guys buy scorpion-tail wolves?" I asked. The men looked up, their eyes scanning my blood-stained clothes and the prize at my feet. They had been watching me since I walked in. The hunters were curious. A kid lugging a whole scorpion-tail wolf into the market wasn't something they saw every day. The leader, a burly man with a weathered face, stared at me as I approached. He looked annoyed before I even opened my mouth. "Can't you see we're selling our own stock?" he snapped. I didn't get angry. I knew he'd misunderstood. "I'm not looking for a spot to compete with you," I said calmly. "I want to sell this entire wolf to you. You can butcher it and sell the parts yourself. I'll give you a discount." His eyes lit up instantly. The people nearby overheard and started crowding around, shouting their own offers. "Sell it to me. I'll take it." The burly man, whose name was Xiao Jiqiang, wasn't about to let a profit slip away. He turned to the crowd and started cursing. "Get lost." The kid came to me first. "Market rules." Once the crowd settled, he turned back to me with a polite, almost oily smile. "I'm Xiao Jiqiang. What's your name, little brother?" I didn't give him my name. I didn't have time for small talk. "One price," I said, cutting straight to the point. 50,000 Blue Star coins. I knew the price was a bit high. I'd checked the market rates before. Xiao Jiqiang's face fell immediately. "Little brother, you're killing me. I won't make a dime at that price." The onlookers started heckling him. "The kid knows his stuff, old Xiao. Don't try to cheat him." I watched their reactions and adjusted my mental math. 48,000, I countered. "Take it now, or I move to the next stall. Think about it. You didn't have to hunt it, so there's no risk to your life. You don't have to clean it yet, so there's no waste. You'll clear at least 3,000 in profit for doing almost nothing." In this market, people bought beasts whole and watched them get butchered on the spot. Selling it intact was a huge advantage for a vendor. My logic hit home. Xiao Jiqiang glanced at the hungry eyes of the other vendors around us and slammed his hand on the table. "Deal. Cash for the beast." He handed over the money. I took the stack of bills and walked away. Behind me, I heard the other hunters teasing him about buying drinks, their voices filled with a mix of jealousy and curiosity. They wondered if a high school kid like me had actually killed that thing. One man mentioned seeing me leave with Yu Lao San's crew yesterday, sparking a rumor that maybe Yu Lao San had finally grown a heart. I didn't care what they thought. I had the money. As I was leaving the trade area, I ran into Xiao Xian, the receptionist from the market's front desk. She stared at me, her jaw dropping. She pointed a finger at me, trembling. You're alive?" she stammered. "Where's Yu Lao San?" I kept my face neutral. "Dead," she gasped, quickly covering her mouth with her hands. "How?" "They took me out to hunt," I said, using the lie I'd prepared. "They tried to use me as bait. I ran, got lost, and by the time I circled back, they'd been killed by something. I found a scorpion-tail wolf in a trap nearby and brought it back." Xiao Xian looked at me for a long time. There was a strange glint in her eyes. Yu Lao San and his crew, they lured so many people to Phoenix Mountain. They were experts at it. I never thought they'd finally mess up. She shook her head. "Nobody is going to miss them. They were scum. But please, next time, come up with a better story than that." I shrugged. She didn't believe me, but she wasn't going to report me either. She turned to open the main gates, humming a cheerful tune. She was glad they were gone. "Thanks," I muttered to her back. My clothes were a mess, shredded by branches and stained with old blood. I looked like a beggar. I used some of the cash to buy a cheap new outfit and clean myself up. Then, I headed to the inner city market and spent nearly 10,000 coins on 10 pounds of high-quality beast meat. By 7 in the morning, I was standing outside my aunt's house. I felt a pang of guilt. I'd been so focused on the hunt that I'd forgotten to tell her I wouldn't be home. She must have been worried sick. Before I could knock, the door swung open. Su Qingwan stood there, her face pale. When she saw me, she nearly screamed. Lin Yuan, where have you been? I've been terrified. My cousin, Ma Ning, ran out behind her. Brother, Mom didn't sleep all night. She even went to the Lin family looking for you. His eyes dropped to the bag in my hand. What's that? Beast meat, I said, handing it over. Ma Ning's eyes went wide as he felt the weight. So much. Where did you get the money for this? I looked at my aunt, who was watching me with intense concern. I borrowed it from a classmate, I lied smoothly. My clothes got ruined, so I stayed at his place last night while we figured things out. I pulled out the remaining 40,000 coins and handed them to her. She looked like she wanted to cry. She didn't want to take my money, but with my uncle's medical bills and Ma Ning's school fees, she didn't have a choice. I'll pay you back, Xiao Yuan, she whispered, her voice heavy with the weight of our poverty. Once your uncle is better. Don't worry about it, Aunt, I said. Just take care of the bills. I left the house shortly after. The immediate crisis was handled, but we were still broke. I needed a way to make real money, and fast. I had one more day of leave from school, thanks to Lei Ming. Honestly, I didn't want to go back at all. Training inside my mental arena was 10 times faster than anything the school could offer. I was learning combat reflexes that no textbook could teach. What was the point of sitting in a classroom learning basic theory when I could be evolving? I needed to find a way to get a long-term leave of absence. I arrived at the Lei Ming martial arts gym early. Bing Bing was at the desk, and I gave her a quick nod before heading straight for the training room. It was time to get back to work. I headed straight for the private training room. My trip to Phoenix Mountain had been a massive success. Beyond the 40,000 coins I made from the scorpion tail wolf, I had managed to kill a green forest python. That was a rank 2 beast. After absorbing its life energy, I felt stronger than ever before, but I needed hard data. The system only showed my progress toward unlocking the next seal. It didn't give me a live readout of my physical stats. I needed to know the conversion rate. If I knew exactly how much blood vitality I gained from a rank 2 beast, I could plan my future hunts with surgical precision. I practiced the familiar routine. I pricked my finger, let the blood drop into the tester, and waited. Ding! The red light faded. The digital screen flickered and then settled on a number, 4.7. My heart hammered against my ribs. 4.7 blood vitality. I could probably crush any high schooler in Jiang City right now. If I remembered correctly, even the geniuses who awakened early and gorged themselves on expensive supplements barely hit 2.0. I didn't know how I compared to the top-tier elites of the city, but it didn't matter. With this growth rate, catching up was only a matter of time. I took a deep breath to steady my nerves and stepped over to the combat power tester. I threw a casual punch. No special techniques, just raw strength. The red numbers blurred on the screen before locking in. 682. I froze. In this world, the ratio between blood vitality and combat power was usually 1 to 100. Even after awakening, most people stayed within a predictable range. My ratio was completely off the charts. I didn't understand why, and honestly, I didn't care to overthink it yet. I sat down, crossed my legs, and closed my eyes. With a single thought, I entered the mental arena within the seal. Last time, I had died 1,000 deaths just to survive 10 minutes against the second opponent. Now, fueled by the energy of the green forest python, it was time to finish this. Successor, do you wish to challenge the second stage? The system voice echoed. Challenge, I replied. The female cultivator appeared on the martial stage. Her eyes were cold and indifferent. I had learned that these opponents, Feng Zhu and this woman, were just memory imprints. They had no consciousness. I could fight her 10,000 times, and she would still treat me like a stranger. She moved first. Her legs blurred as she launched herself into the air, aiming a devastating kick at my head. This time, I didn't dodge. I surged my blood vitality into my fist and met her strike head-on. Boom. The collision sent a shock wave through the air. We both skidded back dozens of meters, stopping right at the edge of the platform. My eyes lit up. In previous attempts, I had survived by running and looking for openings. But now, our strength was comparable. She wasn't an invincible wall anymore. I lunged. I was a bolt of lightning, closing the gap in a heartbeat. I threw a heavy punch toward her face. She tilted her head, her movements ghostly and fluid, and stepped into a stable stance. She was actually dodging my attacks now. That gave me a massive surge of confidence. I shifted my weight, turning my hand into a blade and swinging it toward her exposed ribs. She blocked. Crack. We traded blows for 30 minutes. The stage echoed with the sound of breaking wind and colliding limbs. Finally, I saw an opening. I drove my fist straight into her throat. Her form flickered and then dissolved into mist. Congratulations. Second stage cleared. Enter the enlightenment moment. Start, I said, my voice thick with excitement. A flood of memories washed over me. Her name was Qingyu. She was born into poverty and lost her parents to war at age 5. A Taoist priest from the Qingfeng temple took her in and taught her the long wind god fist. By 15, she was a master. By 30, she found a hidden legacy in the Kunlun Mountains and began practicing ancient breathing techniques. She lived to be 158. She had spent her life struggling against a world where spiritual energy was fading. To break through her limits, she had researched medicinal alchemy and created something called the Spirit Return Blood Soup. It was this soup that allowed her to break into the Xiantian realm. As the images faded, the recipe and the refinement process for the soup were seared into my brain. I stayed in the arena, sitting in silence. I thought about what I had seen. Qingyu mentioned the fading spiritual energy. Fang Zhu had mentioned a broken world. Who was the saint who chose these legacies? And why did they all focus so much on longevity? I had a few theories, but I needed more stages to prove them. I spent the rest of the day in the gym's training room. I practiced the breathing techniques and ran through my 5 elements fist over and over until the movements felt as natural as breathing. By the time I stopped, I checked my stats again. Blood vitality, 5.3. Combat power, 721. I was thrilled, but the joy was short-lived. I was getting stronger, but I was hitting a wall with my techniques. The 5 elements fist was basic. I had only killed the python because I knew its weaknesses, not because my martial arts were superior. If I wanted to multiply my combat power, I needed a high-grade cultivation manual. I couldn't count on the system to give me a manual in the next stage. I had to look for one in the real world. There was 1 month left until the college entrance exams. If I could reach the level of a rank 2 martial artist by then, I could get into a top-tier university. There, I would have access to the best teachers and the highest level techniques. I wiped the sweat from my forehead, walked out of the training room, and gave Bing Bing a wave on my way out. It was time to get ready for what came next. I walked out of the Laming martial arts gym and bumped right into Ming. He was heading home from school, but he wasn't his usual loud, energetic self. He walked with his head down, looking troubled. Ming, I called out. He froze, his body tensing up before he slowly looked my way. His face was heavy with gloom. I reached out and patted his shoulder, trying to lighten the mood. What happened? You look like you lost your best friend. He opened his mouth to speak, but the words seemed stuck in his throat. I gave him a light punch to the chest. We're brothers. There's nothing you can't tell me. He hesitated for a long second. Brother Yuan, you've been expelled. I went cold. Expelled? For what? It made no sense. Even if my blood vitality had been low, I was still the top-ranked student in the entire school for academic subjects. I had even been awarded a grade 1 gene medicine recently because of my grades. There was no logical reason to kick me out. Ming started stuttering. Yesterday morning, I went to Li Dongsheng to ask for leave on your behalf. He refused to sign it. I went to your house to find you, but your father said he didn't know where you were. Since you missed 2 days, Li Dongsheng marked you as truant and processed the expulsion. I narrowed my eyes. 2 days of missing class shouldn't lead to an immediate expulsion. Not for a top student. This felt personal. I forced a smile and shook my head. It's fine, Ming. Go on home. I'll go to the school tomorrow and clear this up. They probably just made a mistake. I headed back to my aunt's house. Before I even stepped through the door, The rich scent of home-cooked food hit me. The table was covered in steaming dishes, a huge pot of stewed meat, braised pork, and several side dishes. Lin Yuan, you're back. Come eat, Su Qingwan said, pulling me toward the table. Ma Jiang and Ma Ning were already sitting there. I looked at my uncle, noticing the bandages. Uncle, how are you feeling? He waved his left hand dismissively. I'm fine. I've got thick skin, and the medicine from the hospital is top tier. The bleeding stopped, and it's already healing. Watch, I can even stand up. Su Qingwan immediately pushed him back down into his seat. He gave a sheepish laugh, but his expression turned serious as he looked at me. Lin Yuan, listen to me. You're staying here from now on. Don't go back to that other house. He was talking about the Lin family. I nodded, a genuine smile reaching my eyes. Ever since I had left that house in a coma, everything had been a blur of survival. This was the first time we had actually sat down to talk like a family. I looked at him and promised, don't worry, uncle. I'm never going back there. We fell on the food like starving wolves. Between Ma Jiang's recovery and the fact that Ma Ning and I were both teenagers in the middle of growth spurts, we were bottomless pits. Su Qingwan had cooked 3 massive pots of rice, and we finished every grain. I felt a surge of energy flowing through my limbs. My muscles felt tight, almost like they were vibrating with power. Ma Ning looked at me, her eyes wide with curiosity. Brother, how can you eat more than me now? You used to eat so little. Su Qingwan quickly cut her off. What do you know? Your brother is a growing boy. It's normal for him to have a big appetite. I smiled, interrupting before they could argue. My blood vitality has been increasing lately. That's why I'm so hungry. The room went dead silent for a heartbeat. Then, Ma Jiang slammed his good hand on the table, his face lighting up. Good. That's incredible news. Some boys are late bloomers, but once they hit that growth phase, their vitality shoots up like a rocket. You're clearly one of them. He turned to Su Qingwan, his voice full of excitement. Tomorrow, make another pot of meat. We need to keep them fed. If Lin Yuan's vitality keeps rising, he's guaranteed to pass the third awakening. Imagine that, 2 martial artists in one family. We might even be able to move to the inner city. Su Qingwan rolled her eyes at him. Stop dreaming about the inner city. Martial artists have to join the military. It's dangerous. I'd rather we stay here and just be safe. The injury Ma Jiang had suffered had clearly terrified her. He just grunted, muttering something about her not understanding the world. After dinner, I went to my room to cultivate. The walls were thin, and I could hear them talking in the living room. My aunt was worried about Ma Jiang going back to work too soon. I'll be fine, Ma Jiang whispered. I need to get back out there. Lin Yuan borrowed a lot of money from his classmates to pay for my medical bills. I have to pay that back so the kid doesn't have to carry that burden. And did you see how much those 2 ate? Once we pay off the debts and help the families of my fallen brothers, I want to buy them some supplements. Even if we can't afford the new stuff, the older formulas will still help. I won't let our kids fall behind others. Su Qingwan sighed deeply. Ma Ning is so talented, but we couldn't even afford a grade 1 gene medicine for her. We're holding them back. I grit my teeth, my heart heavy. I had to get stronger. I had to become a martial artist and make enough money to pull this family out of poverty. I thought about the bottle of gene medicine I had smashed back at the Lin house and felt a brief sting of regret. But I shook it off. Regret was useless. I closed my eyes and focused entirely on my cultivation. The next morning, I was up before the sun. I grabbed 2 large buns from the kitchen, stuffing one in my mouth and holding the other as I ran out the door. My aunt shouted something after me, but I was already gone. I knew Li Dongxing's schedule. His first class was in the morning, and I needed to catch him before he started. I waited in the long corridor connecting the office building to the classrooms. After 10 minutes, I saw him. He was walking slowly, looking smug and self-important. Teacher Li, I said, stepping into his path. His face soured the moment he recognized me. Lin Yuan, you still have the nerve to show up here? Didn't Lei Ming tell you? You've been expelled. I kept my expression calm, even offering a small smile. He told me, but I'm here because I want to know exactly why. Li Dongsheng let out a cold, mocking laugh. Why? You haven't shown up to school for 2 days, Lin Yuan. You really have the nerve to ask why you're being expelled. I kept my voice flat and calm. First of all, I had Lei Ming ask for a leave of absence on my behalf. Second, Even if you didn't approve it, that counts as truancy. At most, I should get a warning. Since when does missing 2 days lead to immediate expulsion? Li Dongxing's face darkened. He opened his mouth to snap back, but I cut him off. Maybe you forgot the school rules, Teacher Li? If your memory is failing you, go check page 28, Article 256 of the Jiangxing Third High Handbook. See what it actually says about attendance. I used to respect this man, but ever since I realized he was eyeing my gene medicine, that respect had vanished. A thought suddenly clicked in my mind. Was this whole expulsion just a petty power move because I refused to sell him my medicine? Don't think your good grades in academic subjects make you untouchable, he hissed. You dare talk back to me? This world belongs to the strong. Below the level of a martial artist, everyone is just an ant. No matter how smart you are, you're just a useless failure who can't awaken. You'll spend your life serving people like me. His voice turned chillingly cold. Expelling you is the light version. If you keep pestering me and offend the wrong people, losing your spot at this school will be the least of your worries. I narrowed my eyes. My guess was right. He was using big figures to threaten me over a single bottle of medicine. It was pathetic. I actually laughed out loud. For a class teacher, he really wasn't very bright. The commotion started drawing a crowd of students in the hallway. Li Dongxing saw me standing my ground like a stubborn rock in a river. He glanced at the gathering crowd, and his eyes landed on a tall, muscular student named Li Ming. Li Ming, the teacher barked. Lin Yuan is no longer a student of Third High. Drag him out of here and throw him off campus. If he resists, treat him as a trespasser. I'll mark it down as a courageous act on your record. Li Ming's eyes lit up. He walked toward me with a nasty grin. You heard the man, Lin Yuan. Let's go. He reached out and clamped a hand onto my arm like a pair of iron pliers. I frowned and gave my arm a sharp, sudden flick. A surge of raw power exploded from my frame, sending Li Ming stumbling back nearly 2 meters. Oh, you've got some kick in you, Li Ming said, surprised. He shook his hand out and lunged at me again. To everyone else, I was the guy with a blood vitality of 0.8, a weakling who couldn't even awaken. Li Ming, on the other hand, had already awakened and was supposedly close to becoming a full martial artist with the help of family-bought supplements. He thought my first move was just a fluke. I watched him move. After the brutal, high-speed battles I'd endured in the system's mental arena, Li Ming's movements looked like a toddler playing house. He was incredibly slow. Is that Lin Yuan? He's frozen stiff, someone whispered. I'd be scared too. Li Ming is basically a martial artist. One punch and Lin Yuan is going to the hospital for a month. I saw the pity in their eyes. Li Ming's fist whistled through the air, aiming straight for my face. Some of the girls nearby covered their eyes, not wanting to see the bloody mess. Then, a scream rang out, but it wasn't mine. Li Ming flew backward as if he'd been hit by a truck. He slammed into the corridor wall with a sickening thud, blood leaking from the corner of his mouth. The hallway went dead silent. The girls peeked through their fingers and gasped. You? Li Ming tried to speak, but he slumped to the floor, breathless. Li Dongxing had already started walking away, assuming the trash had been handled. When he heard the scream, he spun around. Seeing his prize student crumpled on the floor, he went pale with rage. He blurred toward me in an instant. Lin Yuan, you lawless brat. He roared, reaching out to grab my throat. I didn't flinch. I caught his wrist midair. My grip was like a vice. As I stared into his eyes, I saw the hair on his arms stand up. He was a grade 1 martial artist with a blood vitality of 5.5. Theoretically, he should have crushed me. But in that moment, looking into my eyes, he felt a genuine surge of fear. How dare you? He shrieked, his voice cracking. I shoved his hand away with enough force to make him stumble. His face was purple with embarrassment and rage. You attacked a teacher. There are witnesses. You're finished. Do you have anything to say for yourself now? I stared at him for a long time, long enough to make him squirm. Then I smiled. Expelled? Fine. I hope you don't regret it. I wasn't going to kill him here. It was a school, after all. But I felt the weight on my chest lift. With my current vitality, any high school in the city would beg me to join them. I couldn't wait to see the look on his face when he realized what he'd thrown away. I turned and walked out of the school gates without looking back. As I stood on the sidewalk, wondering which school to visit first, a man stepped into my path. Lin Yuan, right? I'd like to have a word. The man wore a suit that had seen better days, slightly wrinkled and worn. He wore thick, black-framed glasses and quickly straightened his jacket when he saw me looking at him. Let me introduce myself, he said, adjusting his glasses. I'm Luo Xiuwu, the principal of Jiangxing 5th High. I blinked. Why would a principal be waiting for me? You know who I am? Of course, he said, trying to look professional. Lin Yuan, the top academic student of 3rd High. Your name is famous. How could I not know you? I looked him up and down. He didn't look nearly as polished as Li Dongsheng, let alone a typical principal. I had my doubts, but I decided to play along to see what he really wanted. Is that so? I asked. And what does the principal of 5th High want with me? Luo Xiuwu cleared his throat, leaning in slightly. Well, it's like this. I heard you aren't at 3rd High anymore, Luo Xiuwu said, his eyes searching mine. Have you found a new place yet? My heart skipped a beat, but I kept my face neutral. Not yet. A flash of joy crossed his face, and he offered a small, hopeful smile. Then I'll be blunt. Would you be interested in joining us at 5th High? Before I could even think about refusing, he started talking faster, as if he were afraid I'd walk away. I know. Our school is small. The equipment is a bit vintage, but it works. You were a top student at 3rd High. If you come to us, I promise to match whatever benefits they gave you. Plus, when it comes to cultivation, I'll personally mentor you. I stared at him in surprise. Seeing my expression, Luo Xiuwu straightened his back with a touch of pride. I may not look like much, but I am a rank 3 martial artist. That caught my attention. At 3rd High, only the principal and vice principal were at that level. Most of the other teachers were rank 2 at best. And yet, here was the head of 5th High, the absolute worst school in Jiangxing, claiming to be rank 3. 5th High was famous for all the wrong reasons. The teaching was terrible, the campus was so small it looked like a primary school, and the buildings were falling apart. Why would a rank 3 martial artist be running a place like that? Luo Xiuwu saw my skepticism. He reached out his hand, looking like he was about to perform a demonstration of strength right there on the sidewalk. Principal Luo, wait, I said, stopping him. I believe you. I'm just confused. Why do you want me at 5th High so badly? To be honest, I didn't care if he was rank 3 or not. At my current stage, at least until the college entrance exams, I didn't need a teacher. I needed resources. Luo Xiuwu seemed prepared for the question. He glanced around the busy street and pointed to a nearby restaurant. It's a long story, Lin Yuan. Do you have a moment to sit? I'll explain everything. I nodded. It was a public place right outside my old school, so I wasn't worried about a trap. Besides, I had only eaten 2 buns for breakfast, and I was starving. I didn't hold back. I polished off 18 meat buns and 4 bowls of porridge while he watched in stunned silence. By the time I wiped my mouth, I had the full story. Basically, Luo Xiuwu was desperate. 5th High wasn't really a school anymore. It was a dumping ground for kids who couldn't get in anywhere else. Over time, parents realized that sending their kids there was a waste of money because nobody ever passed the university exams. Enrollment had plummeted. Now, the higher-ups had issued an ultimatum. If 5th High's university admission rate was 0 again this year, the school would be shut down for good. Luo Xiuwu's plan was simple: recruit a genius to boost the stats and save the school's license. I understand, I said, leaning back. But how did you know I was available? And how did you know I'd fit your criteria? Luo Xiuwu looked a bit embarrassed. I was having dinner with some old friends yesterday. They told me the news. They said you were a genius, the top of 3rd High. I felt a sudden wave of pity for the man. His friends had clearly set him up, probably laughing behind his back about him recruiting a student with a 0.8 vitality. But as I thought about it, I realized this was actually a perfect opportunity for me. If I went to 1st High and showed off my true power, I'd get in, sure. But I wouldn't have any leverage. I'd be just another student under their thumb. 5th High was different. Here, I could call the shots. Principal Luo, I said, if I join, what's in it for me? His eyes lit up. He knew he had me. I can offer you everything 3rd High gave you, plus. He hesitated, calculating. I will personally give you a bonus of 50,000 blue star coins. I let the silence stretch for a moment. I have 3 conditions. If you agree, we have a deal. First, The bonus must be 100,000 coins, paid up front. Second, I won't be attending classes. You cannot restrict my freedom before the exams. Third, you handle all the transfer paperwork. Luo Xiaowu frowned, his mind racing. Then, he gritted his teeth and slammed his hand on the table. Fine, I agree. I smiled and reached across the table. A pleasure doing business with you. We went to 5th High just to make it official. After a quick tour of the crumbling facilities, I walked out with 100,000 coins in my account. It was the right move. I didn't need a school. I just needed a spot on the exam roster. More importantly, I needed money for the spirit turtle blood-sustaining soup. The ingredients were expensive, and the money I'd made hunting scorpion-tail wolves was already gone. Hunting in the mountains was still too dangerous for me to do full-time. This was easy money. As for Luo Xiaowu being tricked by his friends, I didn't say a word. As long as I got him that university spot, I'd fulfilled my end of the bargain. My conscience was clear. While I was walking away, a group of middle-aged men were gathered in a private room at a high-end restaurant near 3rd High. A roasted lamb leg sat untouched on the table as they toasted each other. There was a knock at the door. A short young man in rough clothes hurried in. Boss, Luo Xiaowu and Lin Yuan just. He stopped, seeing the other men. The leader waved him off. It's fine. These are all friends. Speak. The young man hesitated. Luo Xiaowu found Lin Yuan at the gates. They ate at a bun shop, and then, it looks like they reached an agreement. I believe Luo Xiaowu has officially recruited him to 5th High. The leader nodded, a smirk spreading across his face. Good. You can go. Once the door closed, the man turned to his friends and laughed. Luo Xiaowu took the bait. The room erupted in mocking laughter. I didn't know about their little game. I was 10 minutes away, standing in front of a massive 3-story building, Anshitang. It was one of the 3 major pharmacy chains in the city. They sold everything from basic herbs to high-end supplements for martial artists. I needed specific ingredients for my soup that I couldn't find anywhere else. The main hall was packed. I stepped inside and joined the long queue, ready to finally start my real cultivation. One at a time. Keep the line moving. A pharmacist in a crisp white coat shouted from behind the left counter. I looked around the massive hall of Anshitang. The shelves were packed. On the left, I saw rows of refined, blood-replenishing potions. In the center, gene serums of various grades glowed under the lights. The right side was dedicated to common daily medicines for ordinary people. I shook my head and scanned the rest of the hall. I searched for a while, but couldn't find a single section selling raw Chinese herbs. Everything here was high-tech and processed. I walked over to the service desk. Excuse me, I said to the receptionist. Where can I find the raw medicinal herbs? The girl gave me a professional smile. Right this way, sir. Please follow me. I followed her through a maze of corridors, turning left and right until we reached a narrow, secluded counter tucked away in a corner. The space was tiny. Inside, an old man with thinning white hair and skin like dried parchment sat slumped over, snoring softly. I could clearly see a puddle of drool on the wooden counter in front of him. This is it, the girl whispered with a smile. Most herbal purchases go through this side entrance. I looked at the small side door next to the counter and understood immediately. In this world, medical technology was incredibly advanced. Whether it was high-end supplements for martial artists or common medicine for the sick, everything was distilled into sleek, efficient potions. Raw herbs were relics of the past. A big pharmacy like Anshitang only kept this section open to preserve their heritage. The old man stirred as we approached. He rubbed his eyes and let out a long, loud yawn. Elder Su, you have a customer, the girl announced. She gave me a quick nod and headed back to the main hall. Elder Su glanced at me, yawning again. What do you want? He didn't look impressed. Very few people came here. Usually, it was just poor folks who couldn't afford modern potions and were looking for cheap folk remedies to try their luck. He clearly pegged me as one of them. I handed him the slip of paper I had prepared. Do you have these? Also, I'm looking to buy a set of decoction equipment. He took the list, his eyes scanning it lazily. Then he froze. When he saw a wild mountain ginseng and several other rare ingredients, he looked up at me in shock. These aren't cheap, he warned. I nodded calmly. Price isn't the issue. Just let me know if you have them and how much for one dose. Seeing my composure, Elder Su's eyes lit up. He realized I wasn't some beggar looking for scraps. He grabbed a calculator and started tapping away furiously, his previous laziness vanishing instantly. One dose is 5,266 blue star coins, he said, leaning over the counter. If you take it, I'll round it down. Call it 5,000 flat. I felt a wave of relief. That was much cheaper than I expected. Based on the pharmacological knowledge I'd inherited from Qing Yu, I knew these herbs were high quality. I had worried my 100,000 coins wouldn't last long, but it turned out that because nobody used raw herbs anymore, the demand was low. I'll take 10 doses, I said, and I still need that equipment. Elder Su's eyes practically turned into gold coins. Right away, I'll get them for you immediately. He took a few steps, then paused and looked at me with a much softer expression. You know, we offer a brewing service here. Or you can rent our professional equipment and do it yourself in one of our private rooms. I blinked. Oh, how does that work? He hurried around the counter to stand next to me, eager to keep me there. If we brew it for you, we handle everything and give you the finished liquid for a small fee. If you rent the equipment, you just pay a deposit and a small usage fee to use our facilities. It's very private. I knew what he was doing. He wanted to lock me in as a recurring customer. If I bought my own gear and left, I might not come back. But if I got used to their lab, I'd be back every time I needed a refill. I didn't mind. I actually needed a quiet, equipped place to work. 10 minutes later, Elder Su had everything ready. He showed me how to use the electronic decoction pot and left the room, looking like he'd just won the lottery. My 50,000 coin purchase had probably covered his entire month's quota. I locked the door. I spread the herbs out on the floor, categorizing them carefully. I thought through the steps one more time, then started the machine. In Qing Yu's memories, he used an earthenware pot over a flame. I was using a high-precision electronic cooker. To make sure I didn't ruin the batch, I started with just one dose. The machine was great for controlling temperature, but the steps for the spirit turtle blood replenishing soup were incredibly complex. By the time I was done, I was drenched in sweat. An hour later, the timer beeped. I pressed stop and poured the liquid into a glass bottle. I had used about 2 liters of water, but after the reduction, I was left with only 20 milliliters of thick, brownish-yellow liquid. It looked exactly like the finished product in my memories. I didn't hesitate. I tilted my head back and downed the whole bottle. A surge of heat blasted down my throat. Within seconds, my body felt like it was melting. A ball of fire ignited in my stomach, radiating outward toward my limbs. I quickly sat cross-legged and began the primordial breathing technique. I guided the energy. With every breath, the fire was tamed, flowing into my meridians like a rushing river. The thin trickle of energy I usually felt grew into a powerful tide. Part of it soaked into my muscles and bones, strengthening them, while the rest settled deep within my core. 10 minutes later, I exhaled a long breath of hot air. I had refined most of the medicinal power. I could feel it. My blood vitality had jumped significantly. It works, I whispered, a grin spreading across my face. I didn't waste another second. I dumped the rest of the herbs out and started the second batch. 2 hours later, 9 small bottles sat in a row before me. Based on how intense that first dose was, I knew I could only process 1 bottle a day. 10 days of medicine. 10 days to change my life. I packed the bottles away, ready to see just how far this soup could take me. Over the next few days, I lived a double life. During the day, I pretended to head to school, but doubled back to the laming martial arts gym, locking myself in the private training room. At night, I retreated to my room at my aunt's house. My life became a repetitive loop. Train, refine, repeat. I was obsessed. Day and night lost all meaning. As my blood vitality climbed, my body changed. The primordial breathing technique became more efficient, and I could process the medicine faster than ever. At first, it took a whole day to refine a single bottle of the spirit turtle blood-sustaining soup. Then it dropped to half a day. Now, I could burn through nearly 4 bottles in 24 hours. Inside the training room, I exhaled a long, hot breath and opened my eyes. I stood up, feeling the raw power vibrating under my skin. I had spent every cent of my 100,000 blue star coins. Every bottle of medicine was gone, except for the last 2 in my bag. It was time to restock, but first, I wanted to see exactly where I stood. I walked over to the combat strength tester. I clenched my fist, feeling my muscles bunch and tighten until my shirt felt like it was about to rip. I let out a sharp breath and threw a punch. Bang! The machine rattled. Bright red numbers flashed on the screen, 1651. I stared at it, a grin breaking across my face. I had broken the 1,000 mark. Next, I stepped onto the blood vitality tester. My heart hammered against my ribs as the display flickered and settled on a value, 11.2. Over 10. That meant I was officially a rank 2 martial artist. It felt surreal. In all of Jiang City, rank 2 artists were rare. Most regular teachers at my high school were only rank 1. I wondered where I ranked among the city's top geniuses now. I packed my things and left the gym, heading straight for the Ungshi Hall pharmacy. It wasn't even noon yet, and old Sue was already dozing off behind his desk. I walked through the side door and tapped on the counter. He jolted awake, blinking his bleary eyes. When he saw it was me, he sat up straight, his face lighting up. "Oh, it's you, little brother," he chirped. "Back for more?" "The same prescription as last time." He treated me like a VIP now. I'd spent 100,000 coins here this month alone, which probably earned him a massive commission. He looked like he wanted to build a shrine in my honor. "I'm not buying today," I said. "I wanted to ask, do you buy medicine here?" Old Sue blinked, confused. "Buy medicine? I don't have the authority for that. Usually, the shop across the street only sells potions from their own labs. I've never heard of them buying from outsiders. Are you planning to?" I didn't answer. He saw I wasn't in a talking mood and decided to be helpful. "Remember that girl at the front desk who brought you in last time? Why don't you go ask her? She might know more." I nodded. "Fine. Go back to sleep, old Sue." He gave a sheepish laugh as I walked toward the main hall. The lobby was crowded. A group of wealthy-looking teenagers was huddled together, looking around with wide eyes. They were surrounding a girl with pale skin and a pretty face, treating her like a princess. "Xiao Wei, I can't believe your family owns Ungshi Hall," one of them exclaimed. "We've been classmates for 3 years, and you never said a word. You're so humble." Xiao Wei smiled, though she looked quite pleased with the attention. "We're classmates, guys. Don't be like that. Family background is one thing, but personal effort is another. There's no point in bragging about what your parents have. We should focus on becoming martial artists and serving the country. That's the real honor." The group erupted in praise. "Well said. Look at that mindset. Xiao Wei, you're already a rank 1 martial artist, right? With the college entrance exams coming up, you'll definitely get into a top academy. Maybe even Kyoto Martial Arts University." Xiao Wei played it cool, though her eyes sparkled. "Kyoto is hard. The geniuses there are usually close to rank 2. I just broke into rank 1, so I wouldn't dare dream that big." I walked past them toward the reception desk. I caught a few of their glances, but ignored them. "Excuse me," I said to the receptionist. "Do you buy tonic medicines here?" The lobby happened to go quiet just as I spoke. My voice carried. The group of students stopped talking and turned to stare at me. The receptionist recognized me, but she looked stumped. "I've never been asked that before. Let me check." She took a few steps away, then turned back. "What kind of tonic? Is it a processed potion like the ones in our display cases?" I hesitated for a second. "No, it's refined from traditional Chinese herbs. But the effect is very strong." The girl's face fell slightly when she heard herbs. She hesitated, but because I'd always been polite, she nodded. "Herbal medicine? Probably not. But I'll ask for you anyway." She started to walk away when a sharp voice cut through the room. "Ask what? Don't bother. Where did this scammer come from, trying to pull a fast one at Ungshi Hall?" I looked over. Xiao Wei was leading her group toward me, her expression fierce. "Miss," the receptionist said, bowing her head. Xiao Wei glared at her. "Do you have a brain? Herbal medicine? Do you honestly believe that stuff is fit for human consumption, let alone for boosting blood vitality?" The receptionist went silent. Xiao Wei turned her cold gaze on me. "Who are you? How dare you try to cheat people in my family's shop?" Her friends immediately chimed in. "Exactly. Look at this place. Scammers are getting bold these days. He looks so young, yet he's doing this kind of dirty work." I narrowed my eyes. My pulse quickened. These kids were labeling me a fraud without even looking at what I had. They were asking for trouble. I took a step forward, staring directly into Xiao Wei's eyes. "You're calling me a scammer?" Under my gaze, Xiao Wei flinched. She looked like she'd been spotted by a predator. Goosebumps broke out on her arms. But then she remembered where she was and who was watching. She puffed out her chest. Only ignorant people believe in herbal soups, she spat. People have died from drinking that garbage. You bring that junk here to sell? What's your real motive? I felt the power in my guts stirring, ready to snap back, when a figure came scurrying over from the side, panting for breath. Xiao Wei, shut up. Don't you dare say another word. The newcomer was an old man dressed in tattered clothes, but the staff at Ungshi Hall clearly respected him. Even the arrogant Xiao Wei lowered her head. Grandpa Su, she muttered. The old man, Su Lao, ignored her and rushed toward me, breathless and full of apologies. Then, he turned to Xiao Wei with a sharp look. Apologize to this young man. Now, Xiao Wei's face turned bright red. Her friends were all watching, and being forced to apologize to a scammer felt like a slap in the face. Why should I? She snapped. Su Lao's brow furrowed. This young man is a valued customer. He just spent 100,000 Blue Star coins in our shop. Your behavior is beyond disrespectful. The crowd gasped. 100,000? That was a massive sum. Even though these kids came from wealthy families, none of them could just pull out that kind of cash on a whim. They looked at me differently now. I didn't look like a rich heir, but money didn't lie. Who knows where he got that money? Xiao Wei grumbled, her voice trailing off. Probably Xiao Wei, Su Lao barked. Under his stern gaze, she finally buckled. She pouted, looking like she wanted to cry. I'm sorry, she whispered. My expression remained cold. I looked at Su Lao and spoke calmly. Elder Su, it seems I'm not very welcome here. I won't overstay my welcome. I didn't wait for a response. I turned on my heel and walked out the door. Su Lao tried to chase after me, but by the time he reached the street, I had already vanished into the crowd. Inside Ungshi Hall, a sophisticated-looking elderly man was walking down the stairs from the second floor. This was Yu Jun, the owner of the hall. He was accompanied by several middle-aged men, all of them looking like important figures. Gentlemen, I'm counting on you, Yu Jun said, bowing slightly to them. If this succeeds, Ungshi Hall will reward you handsomely. The men quickly bowed back, waving off his thanks. Elder Yu, you're too kind. Helping Ungshi Hall is an honor for us. As the group walked toward the exit, they passed Xiao Wei. She perked up instantly. Grandpa. Yu Jun nodded at her, but didn't stop. He escorted his guests all the way to their carriages. Once they were gone, he stood at the entrance for a moment, lost in thought. He turned to go back inside, and nearly ran into a panting Su Lao. Old Su, what's the rush? Yu Jun asked, amused. Su Lao looked a bit awkward. Nothing, just a small misunderstanding. Yu Jun chuckled. You're getting up there in age. Don't push yourself so hard. I'll assign an apprentice to help you out so you can take it easy. The two men had grown up together in the shop. Even though Su Lao wasn't the best at cultivating herbs, Yu Jun kept him on out of loyalty. I don't need an apprentice, Su Lao said, waving his hands. Look at me. I'm still fast on my feet. They walked back into the lobby together. The moment Xiao Wei saw her grandfather, she ran to him, her eyes welling up with fake tears. Grandpa. Yu Jun knew his granddaughter's temperament well. What happened? And who are all these friends of yours? Xiao Wei introduced her classmates and then launched into a twisted version of what had happened. She painted me as a fraud who was trying to trick the shop. I told him he was a scammer, but Grandpa Su insisted he was a customer. Yu Jun's eyes shifted to Su Lao. Is that true? Su Lao sighed and explained the truth. He detailed how I had come in and bought a massive amount of herbs for cash. As Yu Jun listened, his expression grew serious. He looked at Xiao Wei's friends and spoke in a gentle, polite tone. It's almost lunchtime. Why don't you all stay for a meal? The students weren't fools. They could see the shift in the atmosphere. They quickly made excuses and hurried out the door. Once the lobby was clear, Yu Jun's face turned stern. Xiao Wei, come with me. He led her up to a quiet, traditional room on the third floor and took a seat in the high chair. Xiao Wei, do you know why Ungshi Hall has survived in Jiang City for so many years? She bit her lip. Because of the hard work of our ancestors? Yu Jun sighed, looking disappointed. That's part of it. But the real reason is our rules. Do you remember Rule 26? Xiao Wei struggled to remember. Rule 26. Every customer who enters must be greeted with sincerity and kindness. No negligence or coldness is allowed. Her face went pale as she realized her mistake. Grandpa, Old Sue was right. Yujun interrupted. You shouldn't have treated that young man that way. Even if he wasn't a customer, anyone who walks through our doors deserves respect. And he spent 100,000 coins. That's not a small matter. He looked out the window, his voice heavy with fatigue. I'm getting old. Your parents are gone, and eventually, this shop will be yours. When will you grow up and lead? Xiaowei started crying for real this time. Grandpa, I'm sorry. I was wrong. Yujun looked at her and felt a pang of worry. He knew her too well. She was quick to admit fault, but even quicker to forget the lesson. Our competitors, Xinifang and Miaofengge, have developed new blood-boosting supplements, he said, his voice dropping. Their products are 20% more effective than ours and cheaper. I've been searching for a new formula to compete, but I've found nothing. If we don't find one soon, we'll lose our spot as one of the big 3 pharmaceutical groups. He looked at her with hope. I wanted you to study medicine so you could handle the core technology yourself. But I heard the other family's new products were developed by their younger generation. Xiaowei felt a sting of shame. Grandpa, I'll go study right now. Yujun shook his head. It's too late for that. I've asked friends to help me find a new recipe. I just hope someone out there has a formula that can save us. Xiaowei walked out of the room, her submissive expression instantly vanishing. Her face twisted with rage. It was all that peasant's fault. Because of him, she had been scolded by her grandfather. So what if he's a customer? She hissed to herself. He's still a liar. You can't make a real blood-boosting soup out of raw herbs. It's impossible. Ordinary people can't even cure a common cold with herbs. Yet this kid thought he could scam Anshitang? I wasn't going to let that happen. My name is Yu Baiwei, and I was determined to expose him. I turned on my heel and headed straight for the decoction room. It was the only place in the building where traditional herbs were still prepared, so it was usually deserted. Old Sue had mentioned the kid was brewing medicine here, so if there were any clues to his fraud, they would be in that room. I didn't know exactly when he had been here last, but I was sure I'd find a smoking gun to prove to my grandfather that the boy was a liar. The security codes for the decoction rooms were all the same. Even though I rarely stepped foot in this dusty corner of the building, I slipped inside easily. The moment the door opened, I winced. The room looked tidy enough, but a thick, pungent smell of boiled herbs hit me like a wall. It was the kind of stench that soaked into the equipment and never truly left. Growing up, I had always hated this smell. Modern medicine was clean, colorless, and odorless. To me, this place felt like a relic of a filthy past. I hesitated, then pinched my nose and started checking the equipment. After a few minutes, my frustration grew. Everything was spotless. In fact, it was cleaner than the high-tech labs I usually worked in. It didn't make sense. Shouldn't a traditional herbalist be messy and disorganized like Old Sue? I searched the room a second time, desperate to find a mistake, but found nothing. I stood there, teeth clenched. Someone must have cleaned up for him. Fine. I'd just wait for his next visit and catch him in the act. I turned to leave, but as I took a step, something in the trash can caught my eye. It was a small glass bottle. I pulled out a couple of tissues, doubling them over to avoid touching the grime, and carefully fished it out. This was the bottle Lin Yuan had used to test his blood-boosting soup during his second refinement. He had forgotten to take it with him. The liquid inside had mostly dried up over the last few days, but a few dark droplets remained at the bottom. I held it up to the light, then sealed it inside a plastic bag and tucked it into my pocket. After scrubbing my hands at the sink until the smell was gone, I hurried to the research lab. Miss you. The researchers greeted me as I walked in. I nodded and went straight to the head of the department. Professor Sue, I have a residue sample here, I said, handing over the bag. Can you test it? I need to know if it's toxic. Professor Sue was our lead scientist, a man obsessed with developing new formulas. Seeing my serious expression, he put on his gloves and took the bottle to his workbench. I watched as he used a pipette to extract the residue, diluting it with water and running it through various reagents. 10 minutes passed. His expression shifted from curiosity to intense gravity. My heart leaped. Is it toxic? I asked, already imagining my grandfather's face when I proved I was right. Professor Sue's eyes were wide, glowing with a strange excitement. "Miss, where did you get this? It's not toxic at all. In fact, I've discovered an incredible amount of energy locked inside these droplets." He looked at the test results, his hands shaking slightly. "Even after I diluted it several times, the energy density is almost on par with our third-generation products. If we can get this formula, Anshatang's fourth-generation supplements will crush the competition." I stood there, frozen. The words hit me like a physical blow. I couldn't move, my mind racing to process the fact that the peasant I had looked down on might actually be a genius. Meanwhile, I, Lin Yuan, stood outside Anshatang, feeling the weight of the rejection. The encounter with Yu Baiwei had taught me a harsh lesson. These big pharmaceutical groups were blinded by their own success. Their prejudice against traditional methods was so deep they wouldn't even look at the truth standing right in front of them. Going to the other two major companies would likely yield the same result. If I wanted to sell this soup, I needed a different path. I didn't hold a grudge against Yu Baiwei, though. The world was built on a strict hierarchy where the strong ate the weak. Until I showed my true strength, being looked down upon was just part of the game. People like her, who looked at the world through a straw, would eventually pay the price for their own ignorance. I decided to head back to the Laming martial arts gym. If anyone could help me move this product, it was them. "Xiao Yuan, you're back." Bing Bing, the receptionist, greeted me warmly. "Want me to open a training room for you?" "No thanks, Bing Bing," I replied with a smile. "I'm actually here to see Uncle Lei." I headed up to the second floor. This was the main training area for the gym's students. Back when I was just a weak kid who hadn't awakened, I used to spend hours here watching them, which was how I had managed to pick up the Five Elements fist. "Hey, Xiao Yuan. Xiao Yuan's here." Several students recognized me and called out. I waved back, weaving through the sound of heavy bags being struck and the scent of sweat. I spotted a muscular young man training nearby. "Where's Uncle Lei?" I asked. He wiped the sweat from his forehead and pointed toward the corner office. "In there." I knocked on the half-open door. "Uncle Lei." Lei Zhendong, the owner of the gym and a second-level martial artist, turned around in his chair. He was Lei Ming's father, and he had always treated me like family. When my own relatives turned their backs on me, he was the one who let me use the facilities for free and encouraged me to keep trying. "Oh, it's you, Xiao Yuan. Come in, sit down," he said. Usually, he greeted me with a booming laugh, but today his face was uncharacteristically grim. He looked at me for a long moment before speaking. "I heard what happened from Mei Ming. Don't worry. I'll look around and see if I can find a better school for you." I realized Lei Ming must have told him about my expulsion. "It's okay, Uncle Lei. I've already found a new school." He frowned, his voice rising with concern. "You mean high school number 5? You can't go there. What could they possibly teach you? Nobody even watches the students there, and their graduation rate is 0. If you go there, your future is over." I felt a headache coming on. It turned out Lei Ming had told his father everything. "Uncle Lei, I'm fine," I said, trying to ease his worry. "I can practice on my own. I don't need a top-tier school too." We went back and forth for a long time. I stood my ground, and eventually, Lei Zhendong let out a long, heavy sigh. "Fine. You have your own ideas, and I won't interfere," he said. "Just make sure you take responsibility for your own decisions." I nodded quickly. I was genuinely moved that he cared enough to try and pull strings for me. I didn't want to burden him more than I already had. "Going to high school number 5 at least keeps your college entrance exam eligibility," he continued. "How about this? Whenever you have time, come here to train. If you have questions, ask me. I'm a second-level martial artist, after all. I think I'm a bit more qualified than the teachers at that school." I didn't argue this time. I just thanked him. He treated me well, but at the end of the day, I wasn't his son. He couldn't force me to do anything, so he offered the best compromise he could. "Actually, Uncle Lei," I said, my tone turning serious, "I came here for another reason." He had just picked up his teacup, but he set it back down immediately. "What is it? Tell me. If I can help, I will." He knew about my family situation through Lei Ming. He had always operated on a simple principle: help me whenever possible. I reached into my pocket and pulled out the bottle containing the spirit turtle blood replenishing soup. I placed it on the desk. "I came across this blood replenishing potion by chance. I want to sell it. Do you have any leads?" Uncle Lei froze. His eyes locked onto the bottle. "This is a blood replenishing potion?" Most potions on the market were clear or lightly colored. The liquid I had presented was dark, thick, and murky. He looked skeptical. It's a potion refined from traditional Chinese medicinal herbs, I explained. Before I could finish, he frowned. Herbs? Traditional medicine? He wasn't a pharmacist, but everyone knew that traditional herbs were outdated. Even ordinary people rarely touched them anymore. He looked at the bottle, then back at me. He had just promised to help me with anything. But this looked unreliable. How effective is it? He asked. Extremely, I said firmly. It's stronger than the third-generation potions currently on the market. Uncle Lei's heart skipped a beat, but not in a good way. He had been ready to help me find a buyer, but my claims sounded like a massive exaggeration. He hesitated, trying to find a polite way to say no. Since the effects haven't been verified, he started, pushing this to buyers might be difficult. We can test it right now, I interrupted. I have 2 bottles. Use one for a trial. He was backed into a corner. He looked at me, looked at the black sludge in the bottle, and then slammed his hand on the desk. Fine. Follow me. We walked out to the training floor. Uncle Lei waved over a muscular man who was mid-workout. Li Hui, come here for a second. The man wiped his hands on his shirt and ran over. What's up, master? Drink this, Uncle Lei ordered, handing him the bottle. Li Hui stared at the dark liquid, hesitating. Uncle Lei didn't give him a choice. He playfully kicked him toward the bottle. It's made from herbs. Don't worry, it won't kill you. It was common knowledge that herbal concoctions usually did nothing. They weren't potent, but they weren't toxic either. At worst, the guy would have a bit of diarrhea. Li Hui grinned, took the bottle, and downed it in one go. Well, feel anything? Uncle Lei and I watched him like hawks. Li Hui shrugged. Master, what was that? Besides being bitter, there's really no. He stopped mid-sentence. His face turned bright red. He clutched his stomach as if a fireball had just exploded inside his gut. Heat radiated from his skin, and within seconds, he was steaming. I panicked. I used the breathing technique to guide energy, so I never had this violent reaction. But martial artists in this world relied on technology and gene locks. Had I just poisoned him? Quick, I shouted. Practice the fist techniques Uncle Lei taught you. Li Hui didn't ask questions. He was burning up. He immediately began running through his forms. As he moved, white mist actually started rising from his pores. He went through the routine 6 times, training for over 10 minutes before he finally stopped. How are you? Are you okay? Uncle Lei asked, his voice tight. He was just as shocked as I was. He'd never seen a reaction this intense from a weak, herbal potion. Li Hui squeezed his fists, testing his strength. A look of pure excitement broke across his face. Master, I'm fine. I feel stronger. He turned to me, eyes wide. Is this a new product from one of the big 3 pharmaceutical groups? It's way more powerful than anything I've used. I can still feel a ball of fire in my gut. I haven't even absorbed all the energy yet. Uncle Lei's expression shifted instantly. He realized the gravity of what was happening. Both of you, come with me, he said, before turning to the staring students. The rest of you back to work. Stop loafing around. He led us to the 2nd floor, where the high-end equipment was kept. He pointed to the blood vitality and combat power testers. Test yourself. Now. Li Hui didn't hesitate. He smashed his fist into the sensor. A few minutes later, Uncle Lei and Li Hui were staring at the digital readout in dead silence. 0.2, Li Hui whispered. Master, my blood vitality increased by a full 0.2. And my combat power went up by 20 points. He grabbed Uncle Lei's shoulders, shaking him. I tested myself this morning. I'm 0.2 higher than I was 3 hours ago. Where did this come from? I want to buy it. I'll buy every bottle you have. I understood his excitement. Li Hui was a first-level martial artist. He had used gene potions to break his first few locks, but his progress had stalled for a month. Gaining 0.2 in 10 minutes was like reliving the day he first awakened. Uncle Lei's heart was pounding. He took a breath and shoved Li Hui toward the door. Get out of here. I'll talk to you later. Once Li Hui was gone, Uncle Lei locked the office door and turned to me with a look of absolute gravity. Xiao Yuan, tell me the truth. Where did you get this? My heart sank. I hesitated, wondering how much I should reveal. Seeing my struggle, he waved his hand. Fine. I won't ask where it came from. Just tell me this. How much more of this can you get? I felt a wave of relief. As long as I have the raw materials, I can produce as much as needed. And the materials, they're just common herbs. I decided to trust him. He had always been good to me, and if I wanted to turn this into a real resource for my own cultivation, I needed his help to distribute it. Uncle Lei's eyes flashed with a sharp, golden light. You can mass-produce this? I can, I said, but it has to be done by hand. The process is delicate. You can't just put it in a machine. Someone has to monitor the flow and the heat. I thought for a moment and added another detail. If I simplified the process, we could potentially use machines for mass production. The potency would drop, but it would be easier to scale. My mind flashed back to the memories I'd inherited. There was a specific method for brewing the soup under less than ideal conditions. It required fewer herbs and less precision. I compared the two versions in my head. The simplified version was perfect for a factory line. Uncle Lei stood up and started pacing the room. He walked in circles for a long time before letting out a defeated sigh. I want to do this business, Lin Yuan. I really do. But the pharmaceutical market in Jiang City is controlled by the big three corporations. It's a closed circle. I'm an outsider. It would be nearly impossible to break in. He knew exactly how valuable this was. Based on Li Hui's reaction, my concoction was significantly stronger than the third-gen products the big three sold. I had told him a bottle cost about 5,000 Blue Star coins to make. The big three sold their version for 50,000. That was a tenfold profit margin. Anyone would be greedy for a piece of that cake. But Uncle Lei was a realist. He knew he didn't have the teeth to protect a cake that big. There's only one way, Uncle Lei said after a long silence. We have to cooperate with one of the big three. My heart jumped. Originally, I just wanted to sell a few bottles to buy more raw materials for my own training. I hadn't thought about a long-term partnership. But listening to him, it made sense. If I had a partner, I wouldn't have to scramble for resources every time I needed to level up. As for giving up some profit, I didn't care. My path was much longer than a few coins. Giving up a little now would let me grow my strength faster. How do we cooperate? I asked. Uncle Lei smiled. That depends on how they talk. But first, we need to get their attention. The underground auction, he added, seeing my confused look. If you walk into a pharmacy right now, they won't even let you through the door, let alone test your medicine. Even if you did, you'd be begging them for a deal. You'd have no leverage. We need to make them come to you. He was right. But with my current lack of connections, I couldn't pull that off alone. The first step is to let this potion circulate in the market, Uncle Lei explained. Once they see its value, they'll hunt you down. Since the regular channels are blocked, the underground auction is our only shot. I frowned. The words underground auction didn't exactly sound like a safe or reputable place. Uncle Lei saw my hesitation and laughed. Don't worry. I have a friend who runs things there. I'll give him a heads up. You go find him, and he'll handle the rest. I looked at him, surprised. Uncle Lei, you're not coming? He laughed and patted my shoulder. I'd love a cut, kid, but I told you, I don't have the power to protect this business. Helping you is just a favor between us. If I took a fee, I wouldn't be much of an uncle, would I? He saw I was about to protest and waved it off. But I won't do it for nothing. If this works out, actually, even if it doesn't, you have to keep me supplied with this potion. I'll provide the herbs, but I want the high-end stuff, not the machine-made version. A wave of warmth hit my chest. Of course, Uncle Lei. We talked for a bit longer before I took the address he gave me and headed for the door. Just as I was leaving, he called me back. He pulled a stack of cash from his desk. Here, 50,000 Blue Star coins. Take it. I tried to push it back, but he shoved it into my hands. You only have one bottle left. When you get to the auction, you'll need a sample for evaluation. If you give that away, how will you bid? Use this money to make a fresh batch. Li Hui used a bottle earlier. Consider this payment for that. I tried to argue, but he cut me off. Stop acting like a girl. Just take it. His expression turned serious. Listen to me. The underground auction is a mess. Don't reveal your identity until the big three show up. They're legitimate companies. They usually won't use dirty tricks. But the other people at that auction? They're vultures. Be careful. If anything happens, find me immediately. I left the gym and went straight to a pharmacy called Jun. I wasn't going back to Anshitang after the way they treated me. Even if my 50,000 coins didn't mean much to them, I wasn't going to give them my business. I'd rather walk further to find a place that treated me like a human being. The service at Jin Pharmacy was decent. I bought the herbs and processed them right there. I ended up with 10 bottles. I kept 9 for myself, put on a simple disguise, and took the remaining 2 bottles toward the address Uncle Lei gave me. The place was on Qibao Street in the inner city. The name sounded fancy, like 7 Treasures, but the reality was the opposite. It was the most dilapidated street in the district, filled with scavengers and shops selling junk, antiques, and questionable goods. It was a lawless, messy place that most people avoided. I couldn't believe an auction was hidden here. The ground was uneven, the bricks were broken, and a musty, old smell hung in the air. Honestly, it looked worse than the slums in the outer city. At least the slums were clean. This place was just filthy. I followed the address, asking for directions until I stopped in front of a tavern that looked surprisingly sturdy. Wangquan Tavern, this was it. I stepped inside. A young waiter immediately approached me. "Welcome, guest. This way, please." I scanned the room. It wasn't large, maybe 80 square meters. There were about a dozen tables arranged neatly around a central counter. The waiter led me to a side table. Since the place was empty, I didn't beat around the bush. "I'm looking for Lu Bo," I said. "Is he here?" The waiter's professional smile vanished instantly. He looked like he'd heard this request 1,000 times. "You're looking for Uncle Lu? Sit tight. I'll go check." A few minutes later, he returned. "Follow me. Uncle Lu is on the 2nd floor." I followed him up the stairs. When we reached the landing, the wall facing the staircase suddenly slid open, revealing a hidden path. The waiter gestured for me to follow. I looked down and realized there was a hidden rope ladder behind the sliding wall. We descended 6 flights of stairs, deep into the belly of the building, until we reached an ancient, circular gallery. It was massive, spanning about 200 square meters. Looking down from the railing, I saw a grand hall that looked exactly like a high-end auction site. Private rooms lined the gallery walls. The waiter pointed to one across the way. "Uncle Lu is in there." I knocked, entered, and the waiter bowed out. Inside, a thin, middle-aged man sat in a classic high-backed chair. His skin was dark and shriveled, giving him a sickly, malnourished look. He looked up at me with sharp eyes. "You're the kid Lei Zhendong sent?" he asked. I nodded. Uncle Lu didn't seem to care about my disguise. He reached out a withered hand. "The goods." I handed him a bottle. He held it up to the light, then uncorked it and took a sniff. His brow furrowed instantly. "You're sure this potion actually works?" "You can test it," I said calmly. Uncle Lu nodded and tapped the armrest of his chair. A young man came running in seconds later. Lu handed him the bottle. "Take this to Zhang Chong. Tell me the results." I was surprised. I expected him to test it on someone right in front of me, the way Uncle Lei had. Uncle Lu saw my expression and gave a small smirk. "Don't worry, kid. This is an underground auction house. We have a professional evaluation department. We'll know its value soon enough. If it's good, we'll list it immediately." A few minutes later, the young man returned and handed Uncle Lu a slip of paper. Lu's face turned serious. He dismissed the messenger with a wave. "The efficacy is just as Lei Zhendong described," Lu said, his tone turning respectful. "It's twice as potent as the 3rd-generation products currently on the market." He paused, calculating. "Leave the other bottle here. I'll handle the paperwork. If everything goes smoothly, we can auction it in 3 days." He leaned forward, his eyes narrowing. "But be prepared. I can't guarantee a massive price. Even though it's twice as strong, it's still just a supplement. I'll do my best to notify the big 3 pharmaceutical groups. They're the only ones who will truly understand what this is worth." I nodded. To a normal person, 1 bottle was just a nice boost. But to the major corporations, this was a roadmap to a new generation of products. It was worth its weight in gold. I left the auction house, updated Uncle Lei, and headed straight back to my training room at the gym. I had 9 bottles of spirit turtle blood refining soup left. That was enough for 2 days of intense cultivation. By the time I finished, the auction would be starting, providing me with the funds to keep going. I spent the next 48 hours in a trance of sweat and heat. I downed the potions one by one. Steam literally billowed off my skin as my body absorbed the energy. When the last bottle was gone, I stood up and stretched. I felt like a new man. I threw a punch at the combat tester. The screen flashed, 2185. Then I stepped onto the vitality tester. The numbers climbed and stopped at 16.3. 16.3. That was higher than most teachers at the third high school. With this much power, I wondered if I could finally handle the third trial. I sat back down, closed my eyes, and entered the system space. Challenger, do you wish to attempt the third trial? The system voice echoed. Challenge, I replied. The environment shifted instantly. A figure appeared in the center of the arena. He wore a Ming-style flying fish robe, ornate and terrifying. He looked like an ancient secret policeman, a Jinui. His frame was thick, muscles bulging under the silk, and a long, slender spring blade hung at his waist. His hand was gripped tightly on the hilt. I could see a sliver of cold steel peeking out from the scabbard. This was the first time an opponent had a weapon. I tensed, my eyes locked on his every move. Swoosh, he moved like a blur. He didn't just run, he exploded forward. The blade left the scabbard with a crisp ring, a silver arc aimed straight for my neck. I ducked and slid to the side, my heart hammering. I braced myself for his next strike, but as I moved to dodge again, a sharp, agonizing pain pierced my skull. The world spun. My vision went black. I snapped awake in the training room, gasping. I rubbed my head, which was still throbbing. I was confused. The blade hadn't touched me. It was still 3 meters away. But the moment I tried to move, something had stung my brain and shut me down instantly. What the hell was that? I went back in for a second attempt. A few seconds later, I was back in the real world again. It was the same result. He was hitting me with some kind of invisible, long-range attack. If I couldn't even get close, how was I supposed to fight? I spent hours at the gym researching and trying again, but I made zero progress. Eventually, I gave up for the night. It was 10 p.m. I cleaned up the room and headed back to my aunt's house. Su Qingwan had dinner waiting. The others had already eaten. Xiao Fan, you're late again. I saved you some food. Eat up. I gave a vague excuse and started shoveling rice into my mouth. My appetite had exploded along with my vitality. I needed at least 6 bowls to feel full. My aunt had just left the whole pot for me this time. I finished it like a whirlwind and looked around the quiet house. Ma Jiang was nowhere to be seen. I looked around the quiet house and noticed one person was missing. Where's my uncle? I asked. Su Qingwan smiled as she wiped the counter. He's heading back to the patrol squad tomorrow. I told him to get some sleep early to adjust his schedule. I frowned. So soon? Shouldn't he rest at home for a few more days? She shrugged helplessly. I told him the same thing, but he can't sit still. I figured it was better to just let him go. I thought back to our conversation in the living room. Maybe she was right. If Ma Jiang stayed home, his anxiety would probably eat him alive. Getting out and staying busy was better for his head. As for money, the 50,000 Blue Star coins I gave them should last a while. Once the auction finished, I'd find another excuse to give Su Qingwan more. I finished my meal and headed for my room. Just as I reached the door, Ma Ning slipped out of his bedroom and waved me over. Why are you still up? I whispered. Usually, he was out cold by this time. I was waiting for you, he murmured. He pressed something into my hand. I looked down and froze. It was a small medicinal vial. It looked like a supplement, but the branding was high-end. This is from my school, Ma Ning whispered, his eyes bright. I got it as an award for being a top student. It's a second-generation supplement from True Medicine Labs. It's not their newest version, but it's powerful. If you take this, your blood vitality might jump high enough to pass the awakening. A lump formed in my throat. A sudden, sharp guilt washed over me. Ma Ning was only a sophomore in high school. His vitality wasn't even at 1.0 yet. Even though he'd technically awakened, he didn't have the gene medicine needed to unlock his potential. He needed this supplement more than I did. It was his foundation for the future. And here I was, so obsessed with my own cultivation and the spirit turtle soup that I hadn't even thought about him. I felt like trash. I don't need it, I said, my voice thick. I shoved the vial back into his hand. Keep it. You're at the age where you need to build your foundation. Don't be stubborn. But you. I'm already a martial artist, Ma Ning. I interrupted, trying to sound convincing. I really don't need this. He looked at me like I was crazy. Don't lie to me. You. I didn't let him finish. I pushed him gently back into his room. Just listen to me. Take the medicine. In a few days, I'll bring you something even better. I promise. I shut his door before he could argue. If the auction went well, I'd have enough money to refine better tonics for him. I might even be able to buy him a grade 1 gene medicine to unlock his potential properly. I couldn't teach him my specific cultivation path yet. I didn't know where it led, and he didn't have a system to guide him, but I could certainly pave his way with resources. The next morning, I headed toward the Laming martial arts gym. As I approached the street corner, I saw the young man from the auction house pacing back and forth. He spotted me and rushed over. "Sir, Manager Lu needs to speak with you." I followed him back to the underground auction house in Qibao Street. Lu Bo didn't waste time with small talk. "The auction for your blood-replenishing tonic is set for tomorrow night at 8 p.m., Lu Bo said. "If you're free, you should attend. We work fast. You'll have your payout within an hour of the final hammer." "What about the big 3 pharmaceutical groups?" I asked. Lu Bo actually smiled. "Don't worry. I've notified them all. Based on their reactions, this is exactly what they've been looking for. They're already trying to sniff out the source. You'll get a good price, and I suspect you'll achieve your other goals too." He was right. Across the city, the big 3 were in a state of total chaos. At True Medicine Labs, the CEO, Xia Qingyang, sat behind a massive mahogany desk. He looked elegant in his suit, but his eyes were sharp. "Have we found the source yet?" "Not yet, sir," his assistant replied, sweating. "But our intel from the auction house says this tonic outperforms our 4th-generation products." Xia Qingyang's jaw tightened. "Keep digging." Over at the Miaofeng Pavilion, the atmosphere was different. A woman in a high-slit qipao stood by a floor-to-ceiling window, swirling a glass of red wine. This was Sikong Yao, the general manager. The door opened, and a young assistant led in an elderly man in a lab coat. "Boss, Professor Zhang is here." Sikong Yao turned, a faint smile on her lips. "Professor, I assume you've heard about Qibao Street. How credible is this?" Professor Zhang adjusted his glasses. "Honestly, it's unlikely. We in True Medicine spent millions and thousands of man-hours to reach the 4th generation. Now some random tonic appears that's even stronger? It feels like a scam. Only the Ungshi Hall might have that kind of tech, and even then, I doubt it." Sikong Yao took a slow sip of wine. "In this business, we can't afford to be wrong. If there's even a 1% chance it's real, we have to have it. Keep a close eye on that auction." But the real explosion was happening at Ungshi Hall. "What do you mean you've seen this before?" Yujun shouted, slamming his hands onto his desk. He stood up so fast his chair nearly flipped. Professor Su, a senior researcher, stood before him. "It was about 3 days ago, right here at Ungshi Hall." "Where? When?" Yujun demanded. Professor Su looked uncomfortable. "Miss Yu Baiwei brought a sample in. I'm not 100% sure it's the same one being auctioned tomorrow, but the specs match. It was significantly stronger than our current products." Yujun stared at him, stunned. "Why am I just hearing about this now?" "The young lady? She told me not to." Yujun didn't wait for the explanation. He turned to his assistant, his face red with anger. "Find Weiwei. I don't care where she is or what she's doing. Get her in here now." Back at Ungshi Hall, Yu Baiwei was losing her mind. She slammed a glass bottle onto the table with a heavy thud. The liquid inside was dark, thick, and completely useless. Another failed batch. She paced the room, waving her arms in a fit of rage. She couldn't understand why she couldn't replicate my results. Finally, she stopped. She decided she had to ask Professor Su if the formula he gave her was wrong. As she turned to leave, she noticed a smudge of black medicine on her right hand. She rushed to the sink, scrubbing her fingers frantically under the freezing water. She smelled her skin, but the scent lingered. She washed again, and again. She dried her hands and sniffed her sleeve, her nose wrinkling in disgust. She couldn't stand the smell for another second. She headed for the door, intending to find Professor Su, but changed her mind. She needed a shower and a change of clothes first. She hadn't gone 2 steps before a servant stopped her. Her grandfather, Yujun, wanted to see her immediately. She didn't care. She told the servant she'd be there after she changed and disappeared down the hallway. Yujun waited in his office for 10 minutes, his patience wearing thin. When his assistant told him that Yu Baiwei was busy changing her clothes, his brow furrowed. He knew his granddaughter was stubborn, but this was urgent. He sighed, forced to wait. Another 10 minutes passed before Yu Baiwei finally walked in. Her hair was still damp from the shower. She looked refreshed, completely unaware of the storm brewing in the room. Yu Jun suppressed his anger, keeping his voice low and steady. He asked her about the day she kicked a young man out of the lobby. He asked if that man had been using their equipment to brew medicine. Yu Baiwei froze. She glanced at Professor Su, who was standing quietly in the corner. She was furious. She had told him to keep this a secret, and he had sold her out. Yu Jun saw the look and his voice rose. He demanded an answer. Startled, she admitted it. She told him that the man, me, had indeed been brewing medicine in their lab. Yu Jun took a deep breath. He wanted every detail. Now that the secret was out, Yu Baiwei didn't hold back. She explained how she went to the lab after I left just to prove I was a fraud. She found a discarded bottle in the trash and took it to Professor Su to test for toxins. The results were the same ones Yu Jun had seen earlier. Yu Jun's face turned pale. He asked her why she hadn't told him immediately, especially since they were struggling to develop their fourth-generation formula. Yu Baiwei looked down at her feet. She whispered that she wanted to analyze the ingredients herself. She wanted the credit for the discovery. That was the breaking point. Yu Jun slammed his hands onto his chair and stood up. He screamed at her. He called her brainless. A formula that powerful wasn't something a girl like her could just reverse engineer. Even the top research teams in the country would need luck to copy it. He was livid. His rivals were already moving forward, and his own granddaughter had chased away the one person who could have saved their business. Yu Baiwei burst into tears. She realized how badly she had messed up. Yu Jun looked at her crying and felt a pang of pity, but the damage was done. He dismissed her with a wave of his hand. Once she was gone, he whispered to himself. They had to go to the auction. There was no other choice. The next night arrived quickly. I left my place an hour early to avoid the crowds, reaching the Qibao Street underground auction around 7. I was shocked. The hall was already packed. Rich socialites in designer clothes mingled with ordinary people. It didn't feel like a secret auction at all. I followed an attendant toward the back. "Isn't this a bit loud for an underground hit?" I asked. The attendant just smiled. He told me the authorities knew exactly what happened here. As long as there was no major trouble, they stayed out of it. It was easier for them to monitor the black market if it stayed in one place. I nodded, walking through the winding corridors. As I rounded a corner, someone rushed past me. We collided, shoulder to shoulder. "Ouch!" the person cried out. My body was different now. My blood vitality had turned my muscles and bones into something as hard as iron. Being bumped by me was like hitting a brick wall. I turned around to apologize, but the words caught in my throat. The man staring back at me was just as stunned. It was Zhongli. His eyes widened, his arrogant mask slipping for a split second. "Lin Yuan," he spat. "What the hell are you doing here?" I didn't call him Brother Zhang Fan anymore. I used his full name. Zhongli looked at me, his eyes cold and dismissive. "How are you here?" he asked, his voice dripping with disdain. "The same way you are," I replied calmly. Zhongli opened his mouth to start another performance, but he suddenly spotted Zhang Zicha sitting far off in the main hall. His expression shifted into a twisted, mocking smile. "Look at you. Are your injuries healed? How does it feel to be homeless lately?" He looked me up and down, sneering at my clothes. "You're dressed like a refugee from outside the city walls. I guess since you're not at home to wear my hand-me-downs, you have nothing left to put on." I had bought these clothes in the outer city. They were standard for most people there, but to Jiang Li, anything that wasn't designer was trash. He was trying to provoke me. I felt nothing. Since I had severed ties with that family, their petty insults couldn't touch me anymore. I looked him dead in the eye. "You'd better shut up right now. Say one more word, and I'll rip your mouth open." My tone was like ice. Jiang Li flinched, visibly shaken for a second. But years of bullying me gave him a false sense of security. He pointed at me and burst into a loud, mocking laugh. "That's the funniest thing I've heard all day? You, a talentless waste who can't even awaken, want to fight me? I could beat you into the dirt with one hand." He stepped closer, his face turning nasty. "Take my advice. This is an auction, not a place for someone like you. Go back to the slums where you belong." My eyes narrowed. In a flash, I moved. Before he could even blink, I was in his personal space. My hands shot out like claws, clamping onto his neck with an iron grip. Jiang Li's face turned a deep, frantic purple. He struggled, but it was useless. To me, he was just a stranger now. If a stranger insulted me like this, I didn't mind teaching them a permanent lesson. Sir, the auction is about to begin. Right this way, please. An attendant stepped in, skillfully interrupting us. He made a polite gesture toward the hall, then leaned in and whispered to me. Sir, we don't allow private fights inside the auction house. It causes a lot of trouble. If there's a grudge, it's best to settle it after the event is over. I stared at Jiang Li for a long moment, watching the sheer terror build in his eyes. I let go. He collapsed, gasping for air, as I turned and walked away without a word. The attendant lingered behind for a second. He shot Jiang Li a cold, dismissive look. That gentleman is a very important guest of this auction house. No one else has the right to ask him to leave. He left Jiang Li standing there, stunned and speechless. Jiang Li couldn't wrap his head around it. Me? An important guest? The fear from a moment ago turned into a bitter, burning resentment. My expression just now had reminded him of the days when I used to surpass him in everything, and his face twisted with rage. I expected the attendant to lead me to a private booth, but we ended up in a corner seat in Lu Bo's room. I felt a slight pang of embarrassment. I had overestimated my standing. One bottle of potion wasn't enough to get me a second-floor VIP suite. I was only here because of Lu Bo. Lu Bo nodded as I sat down. The auction is starting. The 3 major pharmaceutical groups arrived an hour early. They really want that potion. I nodded. They need it. They can't afford not to be anxious. Lu Bo actually smiled, a rare sight. Usually, this place is for small-time collectors or people with shady backgrounds. The big corporations look down on us. But because of you, they're all here. As a thank you, we're putting your potion as the final item. Also, we're cutting our commission from 20% down to 10%. I understood his game immediately. By putting the potion last, they were forcing the big spenders to sit through every other item. It was a clever way to boost sales for the rest of the night. That's fine with me, I said. 8 o'clock arrived. The host's voice boomed through the hall, welcoming the guests. Lu Bo stood up and gestured for me to follow him to a table by the window. The hall below was packed. Are the pharmaceutical people down there? I asked. Lu Bo shook his head. No, they're in the booths diagonally across from us. VIPs get VIP treatment. If they're comfortable, they spend more. One night like this can cover a whole month of our usual revenue. I was impressed. I didn't know their exact numbers, but a month's revenue in one night was a staggering amount of money. The host finished his intro. And now, our first item. 2 large men hauled a heavy crate onto the stage. They swung the doors open. A small tiger cub poked its head out, looking weak and tired. The first item, a Vajra tiger cub, the host shouted. Only a month old. Its hide is incredibly tough, and its defense is legendary. I was shocked. A Vajra tiger? That's a tier 2 mutated beast. What's the point of buying a cub? It barely has any meat on it. Even if you extracted its blood essence, it wouldn't be much. Lu Bo watched the stage with a neutral expression. They don't buy it for meat. They buy it as a pet. I stared at him. Isn't it illegal to keep mutated beasts as pets? Lu Bo chuckled. Just because it's illegal doesn't mean people don't do it. We're an underground auction. This is exactly what we do. I frowned. The law existed for a reason. Mutated beasts were uncontrollable. A cub was harmless, but a grown tier 2 beast could tear through a city block if it went berserk. Lu Bo saw my concern. In the circles of the elite, there are ways to tame them. They make them as obedient as house cats. He didn't elaborate, and I didn't ask. This was the reality of the world. Might makes right. Power brings privileges that the law doesn't touch. If they could keep tigers, they could probably keep anything. The starting bid for the Vajra tiger is 50,000, the host announced. Minimum bid increase is 1,000. The auction officially began. The bids started flying immediately. 55,000, 56,000. The numbers climbed as people in the crowd held up their signs. A few minutes later, the Vajra tiger cub was sold to a young man for 86,000 Blue Star coins. Once the cub was handed over, the auction moved right along. The second item was a fragmented cultivation manual. The crowd didn't seem very interested in a broken technique, but my heart started racing the moment I saw it. Ever since I gained my spatial ability, my cultivation speed had been incredible, but I lacked a proper manual to guide my growth. Right now, I only had the 5 elements fist I learned from the Laming martial arts gym and some basic moves from the 5 paths of true understanding. I had picked up a few scattered techniques by watching Fong Ju and Qing Yu fight, but those were just bits and pieces. I couldn't channel my full strength without a systematic style. If I had the right manual, my power would reach a whole new level. But this one was incomplete, and the starting price was tens of thousands. It wasn't worth the risk. I forced myself to stay calm and suppress the urge to bid. In the end, nobody wanted it, and the manual was taken off the stage. The next few items were a blur: maps, medicinal herbs, antiques, and all sorts of oddities. Finally, after the 9th item was sold, we reached the main event. And now, the host announced, his voice dropping to a serious tone, we move to our final item of the day, the most important one. A slender waitress walked onto the stage carrying a tray covered by a delicate red silk cloth. The host reached out and whipped the silk away. A small glass bottle, about 50 milliliters, sat on the tray. It was half full of a brownish liquid. In an instant, every eye in the room locked onto that bottle. I could feel the tension shift. In the VIP boxes diagonally across from me, the representatives from the 3 major pharmaceutical giants suddenly stood up. I could see their silhouettes pressed against the glass. This potion is refined from traditional medicinal herbs and is incredibly effective at boosting blood vitality, the host explained. A single 20 milliliter dose can increase a martial artist's vitality by about 0.3. Results may vary slightly depending on the individual, but it remains within a consistent range. Let the bidding begin. The hall erupted. 60,000, someone shouted. 65,000, another voice cut in. 70,000. The host banged his gavel. Quiet. One at a time. Suddenly, a sharp ding echoed from one of the VIP windows. A pair of glowing numbers appeared on the glass. 100,000. This was a special feature for VIPs, a way to show off their status and wealth without having to shout like the commoners below. And Sherdang bids 100,000 blue star coins, the host shouted. Does anyone else want a challenge? The main floor went silent. Most people had come here hoping for a bargain, thinking the rumors about this potion were exaggerated. Even if it was amazing, the 4th generation products from the big 3 companies sold for about 80,000 a bottle. Paying 100,000 for a legendary but unproven potion was a gamble. Once the price crossed that threshold, the regular bidders backed out. Now, it was a war between the giants. 110,000, 120, 150. Jin Yaofeng and Miaofonga weren't about to let Shirtang win easily. The price kept climbing, step by step. Inside the Jin Yaofeng box, Xiao Qingyang sat calmly by the window. His assistant looked anxious. Sir, the price is already at 260,000. Should we keep going? Xiao Qingyang didn't blink. Keep going. Why wouldn't we? Even if the effects are a lie, we can't let Shirtang or Miaofonga get their hands on something that might surpass our 4th generation tech. Bid higher. In the Miaofonga box, Sikong Yao squinted at the stage and sighed. They're crazy. Spending this much on a mystery potion? And Shirtang and Jin Yaofeng have lost their minds. But I have to follow. She waved her hand, signaling her staff to raise the bid. Meanwhile, in the Shirtang box, Yu Jun and his grandson Yu Baiwei were watching the numbers climb. Grandfather, Yu Baiwei whispered, his voice shaking. This price is insane. We could buy 5 bottles of our own 3rd generation product for this much. Keep bidding. Yu Jun snapped. As long as they offer, we follow. But Yu Jun turned and glared at him. We have no choice. The other 2 companies have already developed their 4th generation products. We're falling behind. If we don't get this potion to study, we're finished. Can't you see that? He was furious. He had hoped to get this potion quietly or even partner with the creator, but his granddaughter's previous mistakes had ruined that chance. Now, he had to pay the price. Yu Baiwei saw the look in his grandfather's eyes and quickly nodded. Okay, I'll add more. The price continued to skyrocket as the 3 giants chased each other. Finally, Shirtang pushed the bid to 510,000. The other 2 boxes went dark. Silence fell over the room. The host looked toward the silent boxes. Shirtang bids 510,000. Any more takers? No. Going once, twice, 3 times. Sold. Congratulations to Insure Tang. The crowd downstairs started buzzing. 510,000. Are they insane? It's just one bottle. You don't get it, someone replied. To us, it's just a boost. To them, it's research. If they find a new formula inside that bottle, it's worth millions to their production lines. They aren't stupid, they're businessmen. Lubo looked at the final price and sighed, clearly disappointed. It's lower than I expected. I thought they'd tear each other apart until it hit 1 million. They were so aggressive at first, but they just stopped once it hit 500,000. I don't like it. I leaned back and smiled. It's actually very normal. Getting this much is already a huge win. Lubo looked at me, surprised that I wasn't upset. How do you figure? They had 2 goals, I explained calmly. First, they wanted the potion to study it and keep it away from their rivals. Second, they wanted to see if they could smoke out the creator. The real reason these giants were bidding so high wasn't just for the potion itself. They wanted the creator. They wanted a partnership. At first, they all fought to own the vial, but they weren't fools. These men ran pharmaceutical empires. They knew better than anyone how difficult it was to reverse engineer a complex formula from a single sample. It was a massive gamble with a tiny chance of success. Instead of sinking millions into research that might lead nowhere, it made much more sense to invest that money directly into the person who made it. If I'm not mistaken, I told Lubo, they'll be knocking on your door any second to ask who I am. That's why I need to leave. Lubo's expression turned serious as he listened to my analysis. He looked at me differently now, his respect for me clearly growing. To him, I was just a high school kid, yet I was reading the corporate battlefield like a seasoned general. You see things very clearly, he admitted, sounding genuinely impressed. Then he paused. But you don't want to meet them? Not even one of them. I stood up and waved him off. Not yet. I can't make it too easy for them. Let them sweat for a few days. I walked toward the door, then stopped and looked back at Lubo. Uncle Lu, I'm counting on you. Keep my identity a secret for now. Don't tell them anything for at least 3 days. I grinned. Who knows? You might even be able to squeeze a little something extra out of them for your trouble. Lubo actually laughed. All right, you little brat. Get out of here. I'll handle the rest. Your money will be in your account within the hour. As the auction ended and the crowd began to filter out, I slipped out of Lubo's office. I circled halfway around the corridor and headed for the exit stairs. Just as I reached the top, the representatives from the 3 major groups burst out of their VIP boxes. Old Man Un, whose name was Insure Tang, walked briskly with his granddaughter, Yu Baiwei. The other 2 leaders, Xia Qingyang and Sikong Yao, were right on his heels, throwing out fake congratulations while trying to keep pace. Congratulations on the potion, Olden, Xia Qingyang called out, his smile not reaching his eyes. Yes, quite a win, Sikong Yao added. And Insure Tang didn't even look back. Thanks. The auction is over. Shouldn't you 2 be heading home? The 2 rivals exchanged a look. We just want to see what this legendary potion actually looks like up close, Xia Qingyang said smoothly. Surely you aren't too stingy to let us have a peek. And Insure Tang's face stayed cold. It's not convenient. They kept bickering as they moved toward the exit. As Yu Baiwei followed her grandfather, she happened to glance toward the stairwell. Her eyes landed on my back for a split second. She frowned, her footsteps faltering. That silhouette, it looked so familiar. Because she slowed down, she accidentally held up her grandfather. And Insure Tang, already annoyed by the 2 flies buzzing around him, snapped at her. What are you stopping for? Yu Baiwei opened her mouth to speak, but she wasn't 100% sure. She didn't want to sound stupid. Nothing, she muttered, hurrying to catch up. Then move faster. And Insure Tang growled. Xia Qingyang and Sikong Yao stuck to Insure Tang like leeches. They followed him through the payment process, watched him take delivery of the potion, and shadowed him all the way to the manager's office. They weren't letting him out of their sight. And Insure Tang didn't care about the audience anymore. He burst into Lubo's room. Lubo, where's the seller? I know he was just here. The other 2 leaders crowded in behind him, their eyes wide with anticipation. Lubo greeted them with a humble, practiced smile. You're right, Lubo said calmly. He was here, but the auction is over, so he left. If I had to guess, he's been gone for about 20 minutes. Regret washed over the three men. They should have come here immediately instead of wasting time at the auction stage. They blamed the host for being so secretive about the manager's location, and Shirtang forced his voice to remain calm. Brother Lu, could you please share the seller's information? I would be deeply grateful. He knew he couldn't hide it from the other two anymore. He didn't even care about the potion he just bought. He just wanted the source. If he couldn't shake his rivals, he'd rather they all get the information at once so they could compete fairly, rather than letting someone pull a sneak attack behind his back. The other two looked at Lu Bo expectantly. Lu Bo bowed slightly. I'm truly sorry. Our underground auction house has strict rules. Without the client's permission, we cannot disclose any personal information. The room went silent as the men frowned, frustrated. That's when Yu Baiwei's voice chirped up from the corner. Grandpa. Everyone turned to look at her. When we were coming down the hall earlier, I think I saw him. What? The leaders shouted in unison. The volume in the room nearly blew the windows out. Why didn't you say something sooner? Yu Baiwei started to explain. He was quiet, and Shirtang cut her off instantly. He didn't want her saying another word in front of his rivals. We're leaving. Now. Yu Baiwei shut her mouth. Xia Qingyang and Sikong Yao watched them go, their brows furrowed. They realized Shirtang might already have more information than them. If he knew what the creator looked like, and he already had the potion to study, they were falling behind. They tried to pester Lu Bo for a while longer, but he wouldn't budge. Eventually, they had no choice but to leave. Lu Bo watched them walk away, frequently looking back over their shoulders. He smiled to himself. I was right. He was going to make a fortune off these guys just by playing gatekeeper. He just had to wait for the fish to get hungry enough to bite the hook. As soon as Xia Qingyang and Sikong Yao got back to their shops, they issued 2 sets of orders. First, find out who put that potion up for auction. Second, find out how Yu Baiwei knew him. Meanwhile, Shirtang dragged his granddaughter into a private room on the 3rd floor. Tell me everything, he commanded. Every single detail. Yu Baiwei bit her lip. When we left the VIP box to go to the stage, I saw him at the exit of the 2nd floor corridor. Xia Qingyang and the others were right there, so I wasn't sure. I hesitated. She described my back, my height, and the timing. It matched perfectly with what Lu Bo had said. And his clothes, she added. They were rough, the kind of cheap stuff people from the outer city wear. He was wearing the same kind of thing when I saw him at our shop before. And Shirtang took a deep breath, his face turning a dark shade of frustration. Why didn't you tell me right then? I wasn't sure, Yu Baiwei said, her voice trembling. And the other 2 bosses were standing right next to us. I didn't want them to hear. And Shirtang's hand shook as he pointed a finger at her. He looked like he was about to have a heart attack. He couldn't believe his own granddaughter could be this dense. Every major player in the city was hunting for this person. She actually saw him, and she let him walk away because she was unsure. You could have signaled me, he hissed. We could have found a way to ditch them. You had the chance of a lifetime in your sights, and you just watched it walk down the stairs. Old Kai looked like he was about to explode from pure rage. He felt a sudden, deep sense of sorrow. He wondered if his family line was simply cursed with stupidity. He didn't even have the energy left to scold Yu Baiwei anymore. He just told her to go find Professor Su. They had work to do. They needed to study the potion they had just bought, but more importantly, they needed to find me. Based on Yu Baiwei's description, I looked like a high school student. That narrowed the search down significantly. There were only a few high schools in the city. Old Kai felt his confidence returning. He had an information advantage over the other 2 major families, and he intended to use it. I had no idea any of this was happening. After I left the auction, I walked down Qibao Street toward the inner city, heading for the Laming Martial Arts Gym. As I reached the intersection near Jiangqing 3rd High School, a voice called out my name. I turned around. Jiang Jiha and Jiang Li were standing right behind me. My biological father looked at me with a stern, disapproving face. He told me the underground auction wasn't a place for someone like me. He said I shouldn't be looking for shortcuts because there was no such thing as a free lunch. I looked at them both with cold eyes. I didn't say a word. I just turned to walk away. Jiang Jia stepped forward and blocked my path. He demanded to know what was wrong with my attitude. I frowned. I told him to move. His face turned dark. He asked how I dared to speak to him like that. I let out a cold laugh. I reminded him that we had nothing to do with each other anymore. He blew up, shouting that he was my father whether I liked it or not. I narrowed my eyes. I told him that a week ago, I was left for dead in the Jiang family house. I told him I was being restrained by not seeking revenge, and he shouldn't push his luck. I glanced at Jiangli. The kid flinched, remembering the feeling of my hand around his throat at the auction. Jiang Jia went silent for a moment, looking guilty, but then he got angry again. I didn't care. I told him to get lost and walked past him. I kept my guard up, ready to strike if he tried anything. He didn't move. When I got home, the atmosphere was heavy. My aunt, Su Qingwan, and my uncle, Ma Jiang, were sitting at the table with their daughter, Ma Ning. They tried to act like everything was fine, but the smiles were forced. Ma Jiang tried to retreat to his room, telling me to eat the food they had saved for me. I didn't move. I could tell something was wrong. Finally, Ma Ning couldn't keep it in. She told me the patrol team had fired her father. My aunt froze. Ma Jiang stopped walking. I was actually relieved. I thought something much worse had happened. I asked why, since he was supposed to be close with the captain. Ma Jiang sighed. He said he was a cripple now and the team didn't want him slowing them down. He even tried to defend the captain, saying he understood why they wouldn't want a disabled man on the team. That set my aunt off. She started shouting about how Ma Jiang had saved that captain's life once, and this was the thanks he got. They were terrified. Losing his job meant losing their only source of income. Ma Ning suddenly spoke up. She said she had a supplement the school gave her as a reward. She wanted to sell it to help the family. Everyone shouted no at the same time. Ma Jiang told her she needed it to build her foundation so she could become a martial artist. My aunt agreed, telling us not to worry about adult problems. I walked over to the table. I told Ma Ning to keep her medicine. Then, I reached into my pocket and pulled out a thick stack of cash. I laid it on the table. It was 100,000 Blue Star coins. Their eyes nearly popped out of their heads. That was more than Ma Jiang earned in a whole year. My aunt started panicking, asking if I had borrowed money from my classmates again. I just smiled. I told them I had made it through legitimate channels. I explained that I had found a unique formula and sold a potion for hundreds of thousands of coins. Ma Jiang looked like his brain had short-circuited. I didn't stop there. I pulled out a few more bottles of high-end supplements and a grade 1 gene medicine for Ma Ning. I had spent 250,000 coins on them on my way home. My aunt started to cry. My aunt's tears started falling the moment she saw the money. She looked at me, her voice trembling, and told me I couldn't just throw money away like this. She asked how much all of this had cost. Ma Jiang shook his head too. He reached out and pushed the stack of cash back toward me, telling me I needed to keep it for myself. He hesitated, looking at the medicine, and said that since Ma Ning had already awakened, they would keep the grade 1 gene medicine for her. But he insisted I use the rest of the supplements for my own training. He told me not to worry about them. Even if he wasn't on the patrol team anymore, he could still find work. I didn't let him finish. I told my uncle to stop arguing and just take it. I explained that this amount of money was nothing to me now. I held the formula, and I knew the 3 major pharmaceutical corporations would be desperate to cooperate with me soon. Once we started mass-producing that potion, the money would never stop flowing. We wouldn't just have enough for 1 bottle of gene medicine, we'd have enough for a lifetime of them. I even told them we'd move to the inner city soon and live in luxury. Su Qingwan and Ma Jiang just stared at each other, clearly thinking I was caught up in some impossible fantasy. While they were hesitating, Ma Ning chimed in with a sweet smile, thanking me. That finally broke the tension and brought a smile to my face. Seeing how happy Ma Ning was, Ma Jiang and Su Qingwan finally accepted the gifts. But Ma Jiang's expression turned serious. He warned me to be careful when dealing with those big corporations. He called them old foxes and told me not to get cheated. I nodded, promising him I'd stay sharp. He sighed, telling me not to carry the whole burden of the family on my shoulders. He was the man of the house, and he'd find a new job tomorrow. I just stared at him, feeling a bit helpless. The guy just wouldn't quit. Still, the dark cloud hanging over the house had finally lifted. We talked for a while longer before I headed back to my room to cultivate. The next morning, the breakfast table was packed with food. I didn't hold back. I ate so much that Su Qingwan and the others were left speechless. I told them my blood vitality was rising, which meant my appetite was growing too. I asked them to cook even more from now on. Ma Jiang was thrilled. To him, if I was eating this much, it meant I had a real shot at awakening. Now that the money problems were solved, my awakening was the only thing he had left to worry about. If I became a martial artist too, our family would be perfect. I decided not to tell them I had already reached that level. The jump in my power had been too fast. I didn't have a good way to explain it yet. It was better to wait. After leaving the house, I headed straight to the Jinyao pharmacy to buy ingredients for spirit turtle blood refining soup. Once I finished brewing it, I locked myself in a private training room at the Laming Martial Arts Gym. 3 days passed in a flash. Inside the quiet room, I opened my eyes and let out a long breath. As I finished my breathing technique, a faint glow seemed to ripple over my skin before sinking back into my body. I stood up and walked over to the combat power tester. I pulled back my fist and slammed it into the machine. A loud bang echoed through the room. The display flickered and stopped. 4,435. Then, the blood vitality results popped up, 35.2. A golden light flashed in my eyes. At this rate, if I had enough money, I could reach rank 3 within a single month. But that was the problem. My cash couldn't keep up with my cultivation. I had burned through 150,000 coins in just 3 days. Martial arts really was a rich man's game. It was like drinking liquid money. I finally understood why it was so hard for poor people to change their social class. They couldn't even get past the first hurdle of the cost. I shook my head. It was time to meet the people from the 3 major pharmaceutical groups. Meanwhile, those 3 groups were losing their minds. For 3 days, they had found absolutely nothing. The investigators sent out by Jinyao Pharmacy and Miaofeng Pavilion had turned the city upside down, but they couldn't even figure out if the person who sold the potion was a man or a woman. Xia Qingyang and Sikong Yao were furious. But since they had 0 leads to begin with, it was like searching for a needle in a haystack. They eventually changed tactics, ordering their people to just watch their rivals. As long as the other companies didn't make progress, they were still in the lead with their 4th-generation potions. Anshitang was in a much worse position. They were the only ones who hadn't developed a 4th-generation product yet. Even though they had bought a sample and knew what I looked like, they couldn't find me. Yu Jun, usually a refined and calm man, was starting to snap at his subordinates. He shouted at them, asking how they could fail to find one person in a city of only tens of thousands of students. His employees stood there, terrified. They explained that if I was intentionally hiding my identity, it was impossible to track me. Yu Jun slammed his hand on the desk, splashing tea everywhere. He told them to use their brains, offer rewards, use indirect pressure, anything. He asked about Old Man Liu from the underground auction. His staff told him the old man was still holding out, waiting to see what the other companies would bid for the information. Yu Jun cursed. The old man had taken so much of their money already and still wouldn't talk. But he knew the other companies were in the same boat. The difference was that the others could afford to wait, and he couldn't. The test results for my potion had come back, and they were devastating. My formula was 50% more effective than their best products, and the production cost was only half as much. The profit margins were insane, yet they couldn't figure out the manufacturing process or find a creator. If this kept up, Anshitang would be wiped out. As Yu Jun sat in his office, staring blankly at the floor, he wondered if this was the end of his company. Suddenly, he heard the sound of frantic running. One of his employees burst back into the room, gasping for air. Yu Jun stood up, leaning forward with desperate hope in his eyes. He asked if there was news. The employee panted, struggling to get the words out, and said that someone from the underground auction had just arrived. The employee gasped for air, his face flushed with excitement. He told me the client was finally willing to meet. The news hit Yu Jun like a physical blow, leaving him frozen in shock. At the same time, word reached the offices of Zhen Medicine House and Miaofeng Pavilion. Xia Qingyang and Sikong Yao dropped everything, rushing toward the underground auction house as fast as they could. An hour later, the 3 rivals met in the hallway of the auction house. Yu Jun's heart sank the moment he saw them. He asked what they were doing there, his voice laced with venom. Sikong Yao just smiled and threw the question back at him, saying they were there for the exact same reason he was. Yu Jun narrowed his eyes. He realized the person behind the scenes was incredibly cunning. This mysterious seller had summoned all three major players at once, dangling the bait without letting anyone bite. They were being played, forced to watch each other like starving wolves while the seller waited for them to tear each other apart before stepping in to collect the spoils. Xia Qingyang and Sikong Yao were thinking the exact same thing. As we walked down the circular gallery, the atmosphere was heavy. Xia Qingyang suggested a pact. He noted that whoever was behind this was a master manipulator who had gone through a lot of trouble to lure them here. He proposed that no matter what kind of bait was thrown out, none of them should make an offer. He wanted to keep the leverage on their side. Sikong Yao thought about it and nodded in agreement. But Yu Jun wasn't buying it. He didn't trust them for a second. He snapped at them, asking why he shouldn't bid. He accused them of wanting him to stay quiet so they could snatch the formula for themselves. He told them he didn't care what they did, and they had no right to tell him how to run his business. Without another word, he quickened his pace, leaving them behind. Sikong Yao frowned, muttering that the old man had finally lost his mind. Xia Qingyang just shook his head with a bitter smile. He knew that if Anshatang didn't secure a new product soon, the company was finished. Fear was driving Yu Jun's desperation. We followed him, heading toward Old Man Lu's private room. By the time we walked in, Yu Jun was already seated and chatting with Old Man Lu. The old man stood up with a greasy smile, inviting the newcomers to take a seat. Sikong Yao looked around the room, her patience wearing thin. She demanded to know where the client was. Old Man Lu told her not to be so anxious. He clapped his hands and called out for Brother Jiang to come out. A young man named Jiang Fan stepped out from a side room. He nodded to us and took a seat next to Old Man Lu with an air of natural confidence. Xia Qingyang and Sikong Yao stared, completely dumbfounded. They looked at each other, wondering if this was some kind of joke. The person sitting in front of them looked like a high school student. His face was youthful, and his skin looked incredibly smooth, likely a side effect of practicing high-level breathing techniques. Sikong Yao hesitated before asking who he was. Old Man Lu smiled and introduced him as the client. With his job done, the old man excused himself to let us talk in private. As the door clicked shut, Sikong Yao grumbled that the old man must be playing us. We had all paid him a fortune for this introduction, and he had brought us a teenager. She looked at Xia Qingyang for support, but he remained silent, his eyes fixed on the boy. Jiang Fan took a slow sip of tea. He looked at Sikong Yao and told her that if she thought this was a joke, she was free to leave. Her face turned red with anger, but she bit back her retort. Xia Qingyang was intrigued. Despite his age, the boy's aura and tone were calm and commanding. He was facing the heads of the three largest pharmaceutical groups in the city without blinking an eye. This was no ordinary kid. Jiang Fan smiled thinly. He introduced himself, confirming he was indeed a high school student and the one who had refined the potion. Yu Jun jumped in immediately, declaring that he believed him and that anyone who didn't should just get out. Sikong Yao was fuming, but she quickly realized Yu Jun knew something she didn't. She forced a smile and apologized, claiming she was just speaking out of turn. Xia Qingyang ignored their bickering and introduced himself properly. He told Jiang Fan he had been looking forward to this meeting for a long time. He didn't beat around the bush. He admitted they were all there for the formula and asked if Jiang Fan was willing to sell it. Jiang Fan nodded. He told us he was interested in a deal, which was why he agreed to the meeting. The tension in the room spiked with excitement. But then, he shook his head. He said he wasn't looking to just sell the formula. He wanted to co-develop new products. The three of us froze. This wasn't how things worked in Jiang City. The big three corporations controlled everything. We bought people out. We didn't partner with them, especially not with a high schooler who had no resources. Sikong Yao laughed, calling him little brother. She told him he clearly didn't understand how the industry worked. She offered him 5 million credits to buy the formula outright, acting like she was doing him a favor. Jiang Fan's eyes narrowed. He clearly hated the nickname, and he had just written her off entirely. 5 million. She really did think he was a child. He ignored her and turned to Xia Qingyang and Yu Jun. He asked if they felt the same way. He reminded us of the results. The potion had the production cost of a basic 4th-generation medicine, but was 50% more effective. We all nodded silently. We knew exactly how much that formula was worth, and it was far more than 5 million. The test results were out. My potion's effectiveness was no longer a secret among the city's major pharmaceutical groups. I scanned the faces in the room, seeing the hunger in their eyes. I told them straight that since they knew the data, they could easily calculate the potential profit. Xia Qingyang spoke up first. He called me Brother Jiang and said he'd offer a fair price to buy the formulae outright. But as for a partnership, he claimed he couldn't make that decision yet. He put a heavy emphasis on the word fair, which felt like a sharp jab at Sikong Yao's insulting 5 million credit offer. Sikong Yao looked like she wanted to bite him, but she kept her mouth shut. I didn't care about their petty power plays. I turned my gaze toward the older man, Yujun. I asked him what he thought. Yujun frowned, lost in thought for a long time. Finally, his voice rasped out a question. He wanted to know exactly how the partnership would work. The faces of Xia Chunyang and Sikong Yao changed instantly. They glared at Yujun like he was a traitor breaking the rules of the game. But Yujun didn't care. Unlike their companies, his Ungshi pharmacy had no fourth-generation product to fall back on. He was backed into a corner. If he played by their rules now, his entire business might vanish. I smiled. The terms were simple. I would provide the formula and the refining technology. Ungshi Pharmacy would handle production and sales. We would split the profits 50-50. Yujun flinched at the number. He told me 50% was too high. I shrugged. I reminded him that Ungshi Pharmacy was currently empty-handed. This potion wouldn't just fix their product gap, it would wipe out their competition. Then I dropped the real hook. I told him the mass-produced version could be modified. We could cut the production cost in half, while keeping the effectiveness 20% higher than any fourth-generation medicine on the market. Yujun's eyes nearly popped out of his head. He sat in silence, calculating. Finally, he shook his head. 50% was still too much for his board to swallow. He countered with 40% for me and 60% for him. I thought about it for a second. 40% was enough. I wasn't planning on staying in Jiang City forever, and I needed a reliable partner to handle the grunt work. I told him we had a deal, but on one condition. Whenever I needed medicinal herbs for my own use, he had to source them for me immediately. Yujun slammed his hand on the table. Deal. Xia Qingyang and Sikong Yao sat there, completely stunned. They hadn't even considered a partnership, but now that the deal was closed, panic set in. They realized they were about to lose everything. Their plans to swallow up Ungshi Pharmacy were going up in smoke. Xia Qingyang scrambled, asking if we could still talk. I looked at them and asked if they were willing to give me 40% of the profits. They froze. They didn't have the authority to give away that much of their corporate pie. I told them that since they weren't interested, they should leave. After they stormed out, Yujun and I finalized the details. As I stood up to go, he stopped me. He apologized for the trouble his granddaughter, Xiao Wei, had caused me at the pharmacy before. He explained she was an orphan he'd raised himself and had been a bit spoiled. I told him it was a small matter and not to worry about it. Yujun looked at me with newfound respect. I could tell he was impressed. To him, I didn't act like a high school kid. I acted like an old fox who knew exactly where to bite. He asked me which high school I attended. I told him high school number 5, waved goodbye, and walked out. I heard him muttering behind me, convinced I was lying to him. After all, nobody from a bottom-tier school like that should be this capable. Over the next 2 days, we signed the official contracts. I handed over the refining steps to his research team. When I met Yujun again on the 3rd floor of the pharmacy, he was in high spirits. He praised my broad mind and extraordinary talent. I ignored the flattery and asked the only thing that mattered. How long until the potion hit the shelves? His answer dampened my mood. He estimated 3 months. Between training staff and updating equipment for herbal refining, they couldn't move any faster. I frowned. I needed money now, for cultivation resources and to buy a house in the inner city. I couldn't wait 3 months to get paid. I asked Yujun for an advance. He agreed instantly and asked how much I needed. I did the math in my head. Between high-level cultivation and real estate, the number was huge. I told him I needed 5 million credits. Even Yujun gasped at that number, but he didn't refuse. He called for someone to bring Xiao Wei into the room. A few minutes later, she walked in wearing a pale green dress. She looked at me, hesitated, and called me Big Brother Jiang. It was clear Yujun had given her a very stern talking to about how she treated me. Yujun looked at Yu Baiwei and told her she had to call me Big Brother Jiang from now on. She looked like she had just swallowed a fly. It was awkward for her, but she didn't dare go against her grandfather's wishes. Yujun nodded, satisfied with her silence, and told her to go withdraw 5 million credits for me. Yu Baiwei froze. She opened her mouth to protest, but Yujun silenced her with a single, sharp look. She quickly masked her shock with a professional smile. Yujun turned back to me and said that since she and I were both young, we should spend more time together. He told me he was usually busy with business, so if I ever needed anything and couldn't find him, I should just call his granddaughter. I simply nodded. I had something else on my mind. I asked Yujun what it took to buy a house in the inner city. I wanted to know if money was the only requirement. Yujun realized then that the 5 million credits were for a down payment. He explained that there were 3 paths to living in the inner city. First, you could become a certified martial artist. Second, you could work for the government. Third, you could be recognized as a special contributor to the city. He told me that if I looked around the inner city, every resident fell into one of those 3 categories. Even then, you still needed a massive amount of money to actually buy the property. I frowned. It was more complicated than I thought. I asked if being a martial artist was really enough to get a spot. Yujun laughed and told me that martial artists were the most precious assets in the country. They were the ones fighting off beasts and protecting the walls. Of course they got special treatment. But it wasn't just about strength. You had to be certified by the Martial Arts Association. Different levels came with different perks. A level 2 martial artist could get jobs for their family members. A level 3 martial artist was gifted a private villa in the inner city. My heart skipped a beat. A free villa and jobs for my family? That sounded exactly like what I needed. Yujun saw me thinking and assumed I was worried about the requirements. He offered to use his connections to get me a special contributor slot, but he said it would take some time. I thanked him but turned him down. If I could get it through my own strength, I would. Yu Baiwei eventually handed me a check for 5 million credits. After I left, she stormed into Yujun's office, fuming. She asked him why he gave me so much money. Yujun just sipped his tea and told her to sit down. He explained that I was a partner who had saved their pharmacy from ruin. Even if I asked for 10 million, he would have paid it. The formula I gave them was worth a fortune. Yu Baiwei wasn't convinced. She complained that I was just a commoner from the outer city who wanted to blow all my money on a house. In her eyes, I was just a kid with a bit of luck. She knew how hard it was to become a martial artist. Most high schoolers couldn't even reach a blood vitality of 1, let alone pay for the expensive gene lock medicines required to rank up. She didn't think I had the talent or the resources to make it. I didn't care about her opinion. I headed straight to the Martial Arts Association. When I walked up to the front desk and said I wanted to certify, the receptionist stared at me like I was speaking a foreign language. She eventually snapped out of it and handed me a form. I started filling out my basic info. Age, height, weight. The girl peeked at my paper and saw I was only 17. I could see the pity in her eyes. She probably saw kids like me every day, dreamers who thought they were special because their blood vitality was close to 1. She didn't say anything, though. She just took the form and checked my details. She told me that 57 people had signed up for the assessment today, and they had only finished 12. She said I'd have to wait at least 3 hours and asked if I wanted to come back tomorrow instead. I looked at the clock on the wall. I wasn't leaving. I had the money, and now I needed the status. I told her I'd wait. It was already 3 in the afternoon. If I had to wait 3 hours, I wouldn't be finished until at least 6. I didn't want to come back a second time. I preferred to get things done in one go. I looked at the receptionist and asked if they would close before my turn came up. She smiled and told me not to worry. Even though the association had official closing hours, they stayed until every registered applicant was tested. The examiners only stopped when she told them to, and she hadn't received that order yet. I nodded. That was good enough for me. The girl grabbed a lantern and my registration form, then stepped out from behind the desk to lead the way. As we turned the corner, a group of students came walking toward us. They were crowded around a boy and a girl, showering them with praise. They were calling them Hao Yu and Su Muqin. The crowd was buzzing about how impressive they were for passing their martial artist certification on the first try. At 17 and 18 years old, they were already being scouted by the top martial arts universities in the country. Some of the other students were complaining about how hard it was to raise their blood vitality, even with expensive supplements. Haoyu was decent-looking and seemed to love the attention, soaking up every compliment with a smug grin. Su Muqin, on the other hand, looked annoyed by the flattery. She was beautiful, and even her baggy school uniform couldn't hide her athletic figure. As they walked past me, Su Muqin suddenly stopped. She turned around and stared at my back, her expression filled with confusion. Haoyu noticed her looking at me, and his face darkened with jealousy. He looked me up and down, taking in my plain, cheap clothes. He sneered, calling me a commoner from the outer city. He told his friends it was a joke for someone like me to try for certification. In his mind, becoming a martial artist required massive amounts of money for gene-lock medicines, money he assumed I didn't have. The rest of the group joined in immediately. They mocked my low-quality genes and guessed I went to some bottom-tier school where the students could barely afford to eat, let alone train. Most of them were just trying to suck up to Haoyu. His family was huge in real estate, and he was known for being generous to his followers. Su Muqin tried to stop them, telling them to keep their mouths shut and clarifying that I wasn't from the outer city. Haoyu didn't care. He was determined to see me fail. He ordered coffee for the whole group and led them toward the lounge area. He wanted to sit there and watch the show. Su Muqin looked like she wanted to leave, but she stayed anyway. She seemed to have something she wanted to say to me. I ignored them all and followed the receptionist down a long hallway. After a few turns, we stopped in front of a heavy door. She knocked softly, and a voice told us to enter. She told me to wait outside for a moment while she took my paperwork in. Through the gap in the door, I saw a massive room, nearly 200 square meters. It was packed with testing equipment and padded mats. People were sitting on benches along the walls. Some were students like me. Others were burly men who looked like they'd seen their fair share of fights. At the front of the room, a row of examiners sat behind a long table. The receptionist handed my form to a middle-aged man with graying hair named Group Leader Wang. He glanced at my details and slid the paper to the bottom of a thick stack. The girl stepped back out and pulled me aside. She told me I was lucky. I was the very last applicant they were taking for the day. She told me to go inside, find a seat against the wall, and wait for my name to be called. I thanked her sincerely. She seemed surprised by my politeness. Most of the kids who came through here were arrogant brats who looked down on the staff. I could tell she liked me just for being decent. I took a deep breath and walked into the room. I walked into the room and felt dozens of eyes lock onto me. I scanned the area for a place to sit, eventually spotting a relatively empty spot against the wall. As I made my way over, the whispers started. I could hear them clearly. They were asking who I was, pointing out that I looked like a student, and worse, someone from the outer city. They wondered if I was actually there for the assessment. In their minds, a skinny kid like me couldn't possibly have the blood vitality required to pass. They thought I was just another dreamer coming here to test my luck. I heard someone mention that the head examiner, Group Leader Wang, had a legendary temper. They predicted he'd be furious that I was wasting his time. According to them, I was in for a world of hurt during the third stage of the test. I ignored the gossip and sat down, keeping my expression calm. Silence. Group Leader Wang barked from the front row. The room went deathly quiet instantly. He swept a harsh gaze across the room, his eyes lingering on me for a brief, annoyed second before he looked away. He clearly wasn't impressed. He turned his attention back to the testing area and called out the next name. Chen Xiangzhuang. A massive, burly man leaped from his seat and hurried to the center of the room. I watched closely, knowing the martial artist assessment was broken into 3 parts: blood vitality, combat power, and practical combat. The first 2 were simple machine tests, much like the ones I'd used at the gym. But you had to pass those to even qualify for the third stage. That final stage was the real hurdle, a duel against a member of the Martial Arts Association. The judges would grade you based on your performance, not just whether you won or lost. It was subjective, which made it much harder for commoners like us. Chen Xiangzhuang stepped up for his blood test. The staff drew his blood and fed the needle into a tall machine. A few minutes later, the device beeped and flashed red. The staff recorded the result, 1.14. He had passed the first hurdle. A look of pure joy spread across his face. Usually, blood vitality and combat power have a 1 to 100 ratio. Since he was well over the 1.0 threshold, His combat power was likely safe. Focus on your power delivery, the staff member said, leading him to the combat tester. Chen took a deep breath, clenched his fist, and slammed it into the sensor. The numbers on the screen blurred past before stopping at 109. Another pass. The staff nodded and gestured to a short, lean middle-aged man who looked incredibly tough. This is the third stage, the staff member explained. You will face a level 1 examiner. Your goal is to defeat him. Don't worry about safety. Group leader Wang will stop the fight if it goes too far. Chen looked confident as he squared up. He towered over the examiner, and I could see the slight hint of arrogance in his posture. He thought his size gave him the edge. Begin. The examiner moved like a flash of lightning. Before Chen could even react, a fist slammed into his stomach. Chen gasped and tried to retreat, but the examiner stuck to him like a shadow. Chen swung a desperate haymaker at the man's head, but the examiner blocked it effortlessly. Their arms collided with a loud crack, and I could tell Chen felt like he'd hit a steel bar. For the next few minutes, it wasn't a fight, it was a beatdown. Chen was completely suppressed. Finally, the examiner's hand formed a claw, lunging straight for Chen's face. Chen was off balance, his guard down, staring at the incoming palm in horror. Stop. That's enough, Group Leader Wang called out. The examiner froze instantly and stepped back. Chen just stood there, stunned. After a quick huddle with the other judges, Wang delivered the verdict. Stage 3. Poor combat awareness, weak technique. Failed. Chen looked like he'd lost his soul. I watched him and shook my head slightly. He had the physical stats, but he lacked a proper inheritance or technique. He was likely a commoner who had awakened before 18, but lacked the money for gene medicine or secret manuals. He tried to figure it out on his own, and it wasn't enough. It made me even more determined. I needed to shine during the college entrance exams to get the leverage I needed for high-level techniques. The testing continued. Number 20 was a student from Jiangxing Martial Arts University. He had mid-level stats and managed to hold his own in the duel, earning a pass. Number 21 was a sharp-looking girl who also sailed through. I sat there for over an hour as the room slowly emptied. My heart stayed steady. Finally, the staff called number 35. There were only about 20 people left now. I was number 58, the very last one. It would be at least another hour. The student for number 35 stepped up to the blood vitality machine. The staff member picked up the needle, ready to start the test. First stage, blood. The door suddenly swung open without a knock. The sound was abrupt, drawing everyone's attention. The staff members all stood up immediately, their expressions turning respectful. President Wu, they greeted in unison. I looked toward the door. A white-haired old man had walked in, accompanied by a young man dressed in very expensive, high-end clothes. President Wu waved his hand, signaling for everyone to sit back down. How is the assessment going? He asked. Group Leader Wang stood up to report. We have 58 applicants today, President. 34 people had already finished their assessments. President Wu didn't seem to care about the data. He listened to Group Leader Wang's report with a bored expression, nodding dismissively. Once the report ended, a small smile finally touched the old man's lips. He gestured toward the young man beside him. He told the staff they were doing a good job, but then he dropped a bombshell. He wanted them to test this young man as soon as the current student on stage finished. President Wu bragged that he had scouted this talent from another city. The kid's blood vitality was a staggering 2.0. The room exploded. Everyone started whispering at once. A blood vitality of 2.0 meant he was already a rank 2 martial artist. He looked no older than 17 or 18. To reach that level at his age was unheard of in a place like Jiangxing. Some people in the crowd called him a genius among geniuses. Others tried to act unimpressed, mentioning that students in the imperial capital reached rank 2 before even starting high school. But someone quickly shot that down. This wasn't the capital. This was Jiangxing. Here, a 2.0 was a god-tier stat for a student. The young man stood there, completely unfazed by the commotion. He just kept chatting and laughing with President Wu, looking down at the people on stage like they were part of a different world. A high school student sitting next to me let out a sharp scoff. He muttered about how pathetic it was that Jiangxing was celebrating a mere rank 2 martial artist like he was a savior. He turned to me, suddenly acting friendly. He said that even though our blood vitality wasn't that high yet, we had earned every bit of it through hard work. He told me that if we got into a good university and got the right resources, we could eventually surpass that guy. I noticed his choice of words. He used we. He was trying to lump me in with him. I remembered clearly how he had looked at me when I first walked in. He had seen my cheap clothes and given me a look of pure disgust. Now, he was acting like we were brothers in arms. I knew exactly why he was changing his tune.